There is one more matter of housekeeping before we move on to the public business proper. This relates to the amendment of the Council of Ministers to Amendment 5 of the Common Strategic Policy, P98. Chief Minister, do you wish to make the proposition to reduce the lodging period in respect of this amendment?
I feel like a brave woman, sir. As I stated earlier when we were debating the previous matter, there has been a considerable amount of pressure on our team, and that has led to some unfortunate delays. I feel it very keenly myself, sir, when I have to deliver speeches with very or none time for preparation. So I do think it's important, though, as this key matter before us today, that we debate every aspect of it, and I simply ask the Assembly to show some understanding, not to the Council of Ministers, actually, but to the officials who support us. And I ask the Assembly if they will kindly allow this slightly shortened lodging period.
Is proposition seconded? Does any member wish to speak on the Deputy Ward?
Thank you, sir. Anyone want to guess what I'm going to say, sir? I was going to say, here we go again, but then all I got in my mind was that song. You know, here I go again on my own, going down the only road I ever know. And I can't even remember who it's by, but there we go. Whitesnake, absolutely. No one's ever quoted Whitesnake in the Assembly before. There we go.
I think we're almost going too far.
Sorry, sir.
No,
but on a serious note, this is, if anything, this is worse than the last time. And this is worse than the last time, and I just want to say some words that was just said by the Chief Minister. And it's difficult to disagree, but how we disagree is the making of this Assembly. The Chief Minister said we need to debate every aspect. I urge members to look at the amendment. What it does, it removes 2/3 of the debate of the aspect of my proposition by removing 2/3 of the wording. And indeed, the amendment itself changes every single word of my amendment. So this is even more difficult for me because I did ask for a ruling. And although, I'll be honest, I don't agree with the outcome, I respect the outcome because that's the process that we have in this Assembly. I don't like it, but I deal with it. But it is a significant change to a backbench amendment to the Common Strategic Policy. And if we agree to shorten the lodging period, it's odds on that we'll go through a debate where we won't have the full debate and it will limit what we talk about. And that is bad for democracy. I've said this earlier, just an hour or so ago. It is bad for democracy, it's bad for this Assembly. And yet again, let's go through a little short, potted history, sir, of my experience in this Assembly over the last 2 sittings. A comments paper on one of my amendments lodged in the morning, late, of the time when that was going to be debated. Now, we got an apology. It's lovely, thank you for the apology, sir. It was very nice, not from you, from the Minister, sir. We got an apology, and that's lovely. And we got an apology earlier, sir. That's lovely too. Apologies are great. I was a teacher, sir. I've had 1 million apologies in my time. And every single time, those apologies were absolutely heartfelt. Absolutely. And then the next time they did it, the heartfelt apology was just as heartfelt. And that's where we are at the moment. I apologise for these things being late. We're very busy. I'm afraid, I have to say, that goes with the job. That goes with leadership. That goes with governance. That goes with being a government. But what also goes with being a government is respecting the standing orders of the Assembly in which you govern. That is governance, and that's what we're doing in this Assembly at the moment. But yet again today, we're going to ask for the second time, to reduce a lodging period with no reason given for why this was late lodged. And I could only lodge my question about it after it was lodged late, so I had to spend my time questioning whether it actually fit with Standing Order 21 and Part 3. And I just make a point, sir, that says that the amendment must relate to the proposition it would amend, must not wholly negate the proposition. I understand it didn't wholly because of the last point. But the first two parts of my proposition to talk about investment in fossil fuels and investment in fracking are two of the biggest issues in climate change. And they have been removed from this proposition entirely by a late lodged amendment. And if we accept this today, we are effectively saying, here we go, it's free rein to absolutely do what you want with standing orders, because you can stand up and say sorry, and you can stand up and say we were busy, and we're all busy, and we're all sorry about things sometimes. And we can say, we can bring an amendment which will completely undermine what you are trying to do, total disregard of standing orders, and that's the type of government that we're going to have. I genuinely don't believe that ministers and members of this assembly want to do that. And in addition to that, and it's very difficult now, sir, because what do I talk about? I should be focusing, I'm trying to use standing orders and focus on the lodging period, but without referring to the other amendments, I don't know how we do it. And other members are going to stand up and refer to amendments with total disregard to the rules. Again, they're happening all the time at the moment. But what could have happened here, and this was the question that was asked, sir, and I believe it was an important question, was that the amendment, it really is to part 3 of my amendment. If the other 2 parts were left, I'd have accepted the amendment to my amendment because, to be quite frank, it doesn't do anything. It's exactly the same wording. Well, it's not the same wording, but it could seem to be the same thing if you really want to push it, and it doesn't really do anything. It's ineffectual and not damaging. But what we've done by reducing this lodging period is saying, however, we're going to give the go-ahead without the proper notice to remove 66.66 recurring percent of the entire proposition. And that's where we are in this assembly at the moment. After earlier having to reduce the lodging period and it being agreed again, and last time again, what's next? Because what's going to happen is, it's only this time, I'm only going to do it this time. It's like me and eating chocolate biscuits. I'm only going to have one. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen that way. Sorry, I don't know why I looked at the Constable Grouville there. I apologise. He caught my eye, sir. He caught my eye on purpose. I'm certain of that, sir. And I jest because, to be quite honest, it's the only way I can deal with how angry I feel with what's happening here. And we're allowing it to happen. And we're sat here saying, that's okay, that's okay. It's just this one time. Oh, it's just this other time. Oh, it's just this next time. And it's just this next time. And actually, they're really important. So we need to give up standing orders because it's important. The assumption being, other members of this assembly, that if it isn't reduced, it's not important. Now, why, sir, do I ask, is it so necessary to bring this late amendment, this wrecking amendment? Why are we not debating, and I quote, debating every aspect of my amendment? Vote against it if you want. So that's entirely the right of, well, it might be a right, I don't know how collective responsibility is working, but you've got the right to vote against it, I think. Yeah. But, sir, we're not. We're stifling debate in this assembly with this decision. And the best way to do this is to say, no, we will not reduce this lodging period, and we will reduce the amendment, which, to be quite frank, sir, I got in on time. And so I got in on time, and if I'm honest, a rather difficult time for myself. But I got the thing in on time because I respect the standing orders of this assembly. And I would like to see others do that, and they are simply not doing it. And being busy doesn't matter. There's so many staff on this island who are busy. Nurses, doctors, teachers, the people who are cleaning our streets, the people who are working in our shops. So lots of people are busy. But I can't say I'll change the rules of my employment because I'm a bit busy. So, sir, I genuinely urge members to not reduce the lodging period. Respect the standing orders of this Assembly. Look at what this proposition, this amendment is going to do to an original proposition. It is going to effectively remove it all. And we will be voting to reduce the lodging period, break standing orders, in order to not have a debate, break democracy down. So again, and so I'm sure people talk against, I spoke early so I can get it out of the way, I can get these issues off my chest, and I can get that song out of my head, sir. So that's really good. I urge you to vote against reducing the lodging period this time. And I say, as I said last time, this is more important than us as a party, you as a government, us as states members, us as whatever allegiances we have in front, friendships, whatever. This is more important. This is about the process of this Assembly. And if we're going to ignore the process of this Assembly, we've got real issues ahead because we're really early on, sir, and this is becoming just second nature to reduce the lodging period. So I urge you not to vote for it. Thank you, sir.
Before I call upon anyone else to speak, I'm asked by the greffier to adjourn for 2 minutes. There's an issue with the voting system which we need to reboot the machinery. So we will adjourn for 2 minutes and then we will come back and resume this particular matter. The debate is on whether we abridge the lodging period for the Council Minister's amendment to Amendment number 5. Does anyone else wish to speak?
Sir, I'm sorry, but Deputy Ozef did wish
Oh, I see,
to
yes.
speak, but
Deputy
he
Ozef
can't
just
get back
popped
in
out. He
because of
can't
the,
come
the security.
far too late now, I'm afraid. Oh. Yes, Deputy.
Thank you, sir. So I apologise for being not here at 14:15. I was just giving evidence to an APPG in London. Not an excuse, but I'm sorry. Sir, if I may say, I think Deputy Ward is slightly being disingenuous in the way that he says matters.
We have previously ruled that disingenuous implies a dishonest approach to the Assembly.
That I would not wish to say so. I withdraw it unequivocally and apologise. I think he is being, if I may say, a little unfair to the Council of Ministers in relation to his amendment. Sir, you have ruled in detail as to whether or not the amendment that has been worked on hard and with good order and with good faith, what is effectively a 3-part proposition. You don't want, sir, a debate on the amendment itself. Suffice it to say there are 3 elements of it, 2 which are certainly linked, and the third one is about a global leader in sustainable finance. That is a very different situation from the 2 other issues. The Council of Ministers would wish to, unfortunately, oppose, for the reasons issued and commented on, the first 2 items. However, what the Council of Ministers tried to do was to think, how can we improve what was a very thoughtful amendment in relation to sustainable finance? And the amendment actually, and so if I could get your clarification, sir, it is not correct to say that it is an abuse of standing orders, that this negates the proposition. You have ruled, sir, in detail to the Chief Minister and to Deputy Ward that it does not do so. And before going on, could I just seek your Chair's clarification on that?
Well, I don't think it's been suggested that that this amendment is an abuse of standing orders by Deputy Ward. I think he described it as a wrecking amendment, which of course is a different concept entirely. But yes, it is correct. I have ruled in some detail that, in my judgment, Standing Order 21B or whatever it is not infringed by the amendment proposed by the Council of Ministers, which is accordingly in order.
And so that explains why the careful drafting of the amendment has been late, to which we apologise. However, that indicates the care and attention to which this has been given. The amendment before members has now the opportunity of debating the substantive issues as raised by Deputy Ward, which he would be able to make. We would then go to the amendment. He could then argue why it is wrong to take out parts A and B, and perhaps if the proposition would have been put in 3 parts, we would have been in a different way. He chose to lodge it in the way he did. That's why we had to get a ruling from you, sir, and effectively it is not in any way infringing the debate. In fact, I would argue that it is improving the debate. More than that, It's actually putting an additional requirement on the Council of Ministers, not use the word just sustainable finance, but green finance, and that in itself, as I've heard from Deputy Jeune in her capacity as Assistant Minister, the area of green finance is a very separate issue from the two other issues he wishes. Deputy Ward disagrees with that, sir, but that's why we are a debating assembly. We are a debating assembly to hear the arguments. He may well quaff, sir. Reform members may quaff, but here is an example of the Council of Ministers giving a respectful comment, a helpful comment that goes further than what Deputy Ward has actually done. I'm sorry, sir, that this was late, but it does show, because of the ruling required, that we need to act with prudence and courtesy and properness. We have done so. There is an amendment to the amendment, which improves, in our view, one area of it. Otherwise, the Council of Ministers will, but it's a matter, of course, for members, whether they've opposed it completely. But the bit that can be enthusiastically supported by the Council of Ministers is the subject of the amendment. I would say that actually, if members would kindly, having given careful regard to the fact that we've had to seek rulings, we've had to do further work, confirm that we can do the Green Finance Initiative, actually, they're going to have two opportunities, dare I say it, sir, to debate these issues, both in the advancing of the amendment as amended and then the substantive proposition. It is actually going to mean that there is a greater, more informed debate on what are, to many areas, if the Deputy keeps on wanting to shake his head, sir, and say it's just about one issue, I would respectfully say, sir, that it's not one issue. These are complicated issues and they're not all the same. And actually, this amendment, after having careful and detailed consideration by the Council of Ministers, your ruling, sir, appropriate assistance by the GREF, communication with the department that's responsible for this, Deputy Jeune and the Environment Minister, we have this opportunity to have a more informed and informed debate on the whole thing. So, of course, reducing standing orders for lodging times is always difficult, but here is a really good example of an amendment to a backbencher's proposition trying to be helpful and not to simply cast the whole thing away. If members don't want to have a reduced standing order, then of course we can bring it back, I suppose, as an amendment if the Chief Minister is so minded in the government plan. We are in the hands of members. We are in the hands of members to improve, widen and specify votes in terms of the different areas. This is not an infringement of members' rights speaking. It's an expansion of members' rights speaking so that they can actually vote on the bit that they might or might not know. Democracy is about debates. Sometimes, sir, it's noisy. Sometimes it can be a bit more than noisy, a bit tempestuous at times. We're doing the right thing here, sir, and I hope members will genuinely take what is a well-intentioned amendment to this important common strategic policy in all due seriousness and allow, I don't know when we're going to be actually taking the amendment to the amendment, but the amendment will be obviously not today and will be able to be heard, and I hope members will accept the reducing in standing orders for the reasons I've set out. And I'm thankful for members for their time.
Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. Deputy Ward has given a very impassioned speech, suggesting that the standing orders are being ignored. But as far as I can see, it's part of the standing orders that we can actually have debates like this. It gives us an opportunity to consider both his original amendment and what he's been presented as an improvement. And I think most of us can look at both things at the same time, as I have with his amendment and the amendment put forward by the Council of Ministers. I think it's actually important to come back down to what the actual definition of green finance is. And there is a definition in the World Economic Forum's website that you can have a look at.
Well, Deputy, is this assisting in whether this should
insofar-
be taken within a reduced lodging period or not? Or is this a matter for the main debate? It's just
I'm saying,
a question.
sir, that insofar as the reduced lodging period gives us the opportunity to improve something that is there, And if we did not accept that reduced lodging period, then that improvement would not happen. So I'm sorry, sir, that I was actually trying to explain why I believed it was an improvement and why I believe that this gave us an opportunity to support that improvement, perhaps even to debate why it is and why it isn't. Am I able to just explain how green finance
if you can,
does
that
encompass the actual concerns which Deputy Ward's amendment is addressing on the World Economic Forum? It describes it as any structured financial activity, a product or service, that's being created to ensure a better environmental outcome. And I do believe that's what his amendment is actually intended to achieve. It includes an array of loans, debt mechanisms and investments that are used to encourage the development of green projects or minimise the impact on the climate of more regular projects, or a combination of both. So in my mind, this actually expands the intent, and I know that any member could actually argue otherwise, and I'd invite them to do that if that's the case. On the general subject of the frequency with which we seem to be debating propositions to bring forward debates of amendments, and obviously we have to, if we're going to consider this improvement, do it this time. I personally think that I would like the Council of Ministers to reflect on why this is happening. And I do have a personal view, which I will discuss with the ministers soon, which is that it's the timing of this government plan in the first term of a government. We have a lot of new people getting their feet under the table, changes of policies, a very short deadline in the current legislation to actually produce the content, to review it, and it has caused a lot of pressure, and I have seen a lot of stress on members. And I very much will be exploring whether there is a possibility of perhaps postponing this in the first year of the first term of a government, because I think we all would be relieved by that. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. Deputy Joseph accused some of us of quaffing. Quaffing is a synonym for drinking, or to drink heartily, and I can tell him that whatever we're drinking, we're not drinking it through straws because he's busy clutching all of those with the arguments that he made in his debate. So I think there's a very simple matter at heart here, which is, do we follow not just the letter of the rules that we have in standing orders, or the spirit of them? And they exist to provide some kind of order for states members to be able to have constructive and well-informed debate where we have enough time leading up to those to consider all of the issues. The only real argument I can see for debating this amendment and allowing standing orders to be relaxed to provide for that is because we fancy it. That is really the only reason. If this were, there is no reason why this couldn't have met the deadlines otherwise. We all met the deadlines for the rest of them. All of the other government amendments, 2 amendments, were met that way as well. And the argument that, well, some people were just a bit busy, it's not a fair argument to make, because the rest of us have got really difficult timetables as well. And that makes it very difficult sometimes to do our jobs and to try to do our best on the floor of this assembly to make those arguments. Sometimes you win them and sometimes you lose them. And if it transpires that for reasons which may well be out of your control, that you can't meet the deadlines that are set and are set for a reason, well, you have to play by the rules, and that means coming to this assembly, and if you want to make the argument that Deputy Ward's amendment is inadequate, I may personally disagree with that, but you're entitled to make that argument, and who knows, you might even win, and it'll be a fair game that gets us there. But to lodge things late and ask for permission to relax the standing orders and not abide by those deadlines, which are set for a reason, in this instance is totally unjustifiable. It is simply because they fancy it. And that's wrong. If they want to enhance debates in their own view by providing different options for Assembly members to debate either for or against, you can meet the deadlines like the rest of us. It really is setting a dangerous and bad precedent for this Assembly if we're going to come here and say, well, you know, we were just busy, so we're going to forget the lodging periods. And we frequently put aside standing orders to debate things without lodging periods being met during the pandemic because everybody agreed it was an emergency. We were working well beyond the normal hours that we otherwise would be. We're busy enough as it stands, but during a crisis you become even more busy, and people work very hard to try to make the best of that situation and get things through. We're not in that situation now, and certainly not with this amendment. There really is no appropriate justification for it. So as I say to members, don't give the green light for this kind of behaviour. Say, we have these rules in place, we're going to make our absolute best effort to meet them. When there's a genuine, strong reason for standing orders to be put aside for lodging periods, because there might be an emergency, something may happen that's completely, that we hadn't predicted before, we can discuss that. I would say it would be courteous actually to raise with members before a States Assembly sitting to say, here's the reasons why. You've now got time to consider that, to decide whether you think that's appropriate or not to reduce lodging periods. But instead, we've come to the Assembly and I think had our support taken for granted on that, to just assume we turned up, we fancy debating it, so let's just deviate from the rules that are set for a particular reason. It's really bad practice, and we can, at this moment at least, say we're going to stick to the rules that actually we've all signed up to in good spirit, and hopefully lessons will be learnt for next time. But in the meantime, I ask members to oppose this, and if they're unhappy with Deputy Ward's amendment, the simple solution there is to vote against it.
Any other member wish to speak on this matter? Deputy Sodden.
Yes, sir. Very briefly, just to point out that standing orders are important. They're what governs our debate and enables us to debate. And I think we should be sticking with them in this instance. Enough is enough.
Deputy, does any other member wish to speak? No other member wishes to speak. I close the debate and call upon the Chief Minister to respond.
Thank you, sir. And I must congratulate Deputy Mezek on being highly entertaining. But there is an important message here, and I think this has sorry, I'm still receiving messages to explain exactly why we are in this situation that we find ourselves in, because it has caused some bafflement amongst our benches also. I think Deputy Ozef explained quite clearly that there was some requirement for rulings and clarity on the amendment at some point, and that, however, that isn't what actually caused the delay, but there has been some delay internally, and it has been, as far as I can understand, not due to the parts of ministers who had signed off this amendment, which is due to improve the amendment of Deputy Ward, which would otherwise be rejected by the Assembly. And perhaps we would be able to amend our government plan in good time to reflect something that was similar and along the lines of thinking of the Council of Ministers. So, look, I can only say that this is a far from ideal situation, and I can only apologise to the Assembly for it. It lies with members simply to decide whether they wish to debate both opportunities and consider both Deputy Ward's view and that of the Council of Ministers, or whether they simply would like to take a ruling on Deputy Ward's. And I'm quite relaxed as to which view the members might wish to take. Given the circumstances, I think that is all I can contribute to this rather imperfect situation, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Minister. The matter is put to the vote. Is the appel called for? Yes, please. It is called for. I invite the greffier to open the voting. Members, of course, to return to their seat. And I invite members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. greffier to close the voting. The proposition has been adopted. 27 votes pour, 18 votes contre.
Those voting for the Conotub of St Saviour, Deputies Wilson, Osoph, Miller, the Conotub of St Peter, St John, St Mary, Deputy Barbara Ward, Deputies Reniff, Ayer, Gorst, Luce, the Conotub of St Helier, Deputies Balash, Ferry, A. Curtis, Moore, War, Gardner, Miles, Scott, Tom Binet, Howell, Jearn, Rose Binet, and Deputy Labby. And those voting, and in the chat, voting for Deputy Stevenson, voting contra, sorry about the order, since I rebooted, it's not in the right order, I need to fix that. Conotub of Grouville, Conotub of St Clement, Deputies Andrews, Coles, Faltham, Mezek, Ward, Farnham, Conotub of St Martin, Deputies Lehegarat, Southern, Alves, Catherine Curtis, Porre, Kovac, the Conotubs of Trinity and St Brelard, and the Conotub of St Juan.
Very well. We now move on to public business. The first item of public business is the Common Strategic Policy, P98, lodged by the Council of Ministers. For the purpose of this debate, the main respondent will be the Chair of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel. There are 7 amendments lodged. Chief Minister, are you accepting any of the amendments?
Yes, sir. I believe that the GREF have been informed of which ones those are, because I don't have those particular details before.
Is that 1, 4, 7 and 3?
That sounds about right, sir. Thank you.
Is that what we've been informed, Greffier? Because sounds about right, might not cut it for the debate. Very well. Are members content to take the proposition as amended by those proposed amendments? Very well, I will take that in the affirmative, and I therefore ask the Greffier to read the proposition as amended by amendments 1, 4, 7 and 3. This is quite a lengthy document to read, and will people please bear with the Greffier because it does need to be read out in full.
The states are asked The states are asked if they are of opinion, in accordance with Article 18.2e of the States of Jersey Law 2005, to approve the statement of the Common Strategic Policy of the Council of Ministers as set out in the report of this proposition, except that A. On page 5 of the report, in the Environment section, before the word environment, there should be inserted the words urban, rural and marine environment. And after the word purposefully, there should be inserted the words unfairly. B. On page 6 of the report, in the Commitment to Partnership section, after the word with there should be inserted the words parishes. C. On page 7 of the report, in the Quality of Life section, after the word housing, there should be inserted the words open space. D. On page 13, Annex 1, in the Children and Family section, after the third paragraph, there should be inserted a new paragraph as follows. We will provide safe walking and cycling facilities to allow children to walk and cycle to school, thereby increasing their health, fitness and independent mobility and reducing the impact of the school run on the environment. E. On page 13, paragraph 6, before the words "we will invest also," there should be inserted the words "we will work towards providing free or lower cost primary health care for all children in Jersey and to reducing other barriers to children accessing primary care as part of the ongoing review of the island's overall health and care system and its sustainable funding." F. On page 14, Annex 1, in the ageing population section, after the fourth paragraph, there should be inserted a new paragraph as follows. We will provide safe walking and other transport options for the elderly and encourage the improvement and expansion of parks and gardens, especially in urban areas. And 2. In the health and well-being section, after the fifth paragraph, should be inserted a new paragraph as follows. We will encourage the improvement and expansion of parks and children's play facilities, especially in urban areas. We will increase our investment in the public realm. G. On page 15, Annex 1, in the Environment section, 1, after the third paragraph should be inserted a new paragraph as follows. By working together with the parishes, we will provide safe and, where achievable, segregated routes for walkers and cyclists by reallocating road space around the island and within the town area to encourage active travel. And 2, in the penultimate paragraph, after the word infrastructure, there should be inserted the words including tree planting and the provision of green spaces. H, on page 15 of the report, in the community section, after the second paragraph, there should be inserted the following new paragraph. We will continue to work towards ensuring that the services and facilities provided by the government are accessible and that the government departments have access and inclusion plans in place so that all people are treated equitably. I. Noting the aspects important to islanders as indicated by the Future Jersey consultation, on page 17 of the report, the words, the table over the page presents some of the key indicators we will use, should be substituted with the following. The Council of Ministers will continue to strive to achieve the long-term vision of Future Jersey and work towards delivering the 10 desired community outcomes arising from it. Future Jersey Vision, an island loved for its beautiful coast and countryside, rich heritage, diverse wildlife and clean air, land and water. An island where a sense of community really matters, a safe place to grow up and enjoy life. An island that offers everyone the opportunity to contribute to and share in the success of a strong, sustainable economy. There is a table showing well-being and outcomes. Under community well-being, children enjoy the best start in life. Islanders enjoy long, healthy, active lives. Islanders feel safe and protected at home, work and in public. Islanders enjoy living in a vibrant and inclusive community. Under economic well-being, islanders are able to afford a decent standard of living. Islanders benefit from a strong economy and rewarding job opportunities. Jersey is an attractive place to do business. Under environmental well-being, Jersey's built and historic environment is valued and enjoyed. Jersey's unique natural environment is protected for future generations. Jersey's natural resources are managed and used responsibly. We will show our progress using the storyboards and related indicators set out within the Jersey Performance Framework. We will improve the relevance and presentation of the indicators within the framework to improve their use. There is a further table. Under community well-being, subsection children, all children in Jersey have the best start in life. All children in Jersey live healthy lives. All children in Jersey learn and achieve. All children in Jersey grow up safely. All children in Jersey are valued and involved. Subsection health and well-being. Islanders benefit from healthy lifestyles. Islanders are protected against social and environmental health hazards. Islanders can access high-quality, effective health services. Islanders with long-term health conditions enjoy a good quality of life. Mental health and well-being are fundamental to quality of life in Jersey. Subsection safety and security. Islanders are safe and protected at home, work and in public. Subsection vibrant and inclusive community. Islanders enjoy living in a vibrant and inclusive community. Islanders engage in the public decisions that affect their island. Economic well-being, subsection affordable living, islanders are able to afford a decent standard of living. Subsection jobs and growth, islanders benefit from a strong, sustainable economy and rewarding job opportunities. Environmental well-being, subsection built environment, St Helier is an attractive town to live in, work in and visit. Islanders live in secure, quality homes that they can afford. Jersey benefits from a safe, sustainable transport system. Subsection natural environment. Jersey's unique natural environment is protected and conserved for future generations. Subsection sustainable resources. Jersey's natural resources are managed and used responsibly. The following table presents further key indicators that highlight the focus of the Common Strategic Policy.
Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. And I just wanted to thank the greffier for reading out those words. Many words on a page, but those words were important to read out. Firstly, of course, because they'll be placed on Hansard, but personally, and I'm sure other members felt this too, it was important to hear them and to be able to reflect on them and their importance, because those words form our common strategic policy. It's, of course, the first of our major documents for our programme for government. Those words set out our principles and our priorities for our work, not just as a government, but once agreed in this assembly, those words form our priorities as an assembly, and this will guide us through to 2026. The people who elected us to represent them wanted change, so this is the first step to putting Jersey back on track and delivering on our election commitments. Our ambition, sir, is clear for Jersey to be a community where everyone can thrive. And to achieve that, we need to deliver change and to make a difference to the lives of islanders. We need to tackle the issues that are of most concern to people and to give them hope that they have a long-term, secure future in this beautiful island. This policy sets the platform for us to focus and deliver for the public. We welcome the challenges to this debate, sir, and we expect scrutiny. We expect to consider that through this process, we should arrive in a better place. A place where we can all support the policies, as the Assembly will agree, not just for today or tomorrow, but over the course of the next 4 years. In recent weeks, we've met with representatives from a great number of different countries, and one thing is clear. We all face significant and long-term social and economic challenges. In our first 4 months in office, I hope that this new government has shown its determination to deliver. And we recognise that ministers can only be fully effective when working constructively and with the broad support of the Assembly, despite some minor issues and challenges that we might find along the way. We also acknowledge that as an Assembly, we'll be judged on how we step up and respond to the challenges of our times. Jersey people have made it clear that they want to see greater levels of accountability from government, and we are doing everything that we can to be transparent and more accountable. We're listening and taking the actions which we think are in Jersey's best interests. So I would like to thank those members who've proposed amendments. We are accepting a good number of them, as you rightly outlined to me earlier. This includes integrating the outcomes of Future Jersey into the policy, as proposed by Deputy Feltham. Almost 4,000 islanders contributed to the Future Jersey document. Although this work was completed over 4 years ago, it still holds great relevance, and it is right to include it in our guiding policy principles. I also thank the Deputy for her amendment on accessible services and facilities. We want to be inclusive and accessible to all members of our community. The Constable of St Helier has also made a constructive amendment on green space and active travel, which we welcome. We want to protect and enhance our environment, but equally we recognise that urban neighbourhoods need improvement so that residents can enjoy more outdoor space. Towns are more livable, more vibrant and more sustainable, with green lungs and ways to get around on foot, bicycle or mobility scooter. We will have the opportunity to discuss the other amendments in more detail as this debate progresses. But for now, sir, I would stress that all of them have been carefully considered. We've responded based on whether we believe the amendments are affordable, achievable and appropriate. When considering each amendment, our position has always been to try and accept them or to consider how we can further amend them in order to allow us to find agreement. So if I can turn now, sir, to what our plan does include. We have 7 equally balanced priorities for change, which will help us to focus on Jersey being a place to live, work, grow old with dignity, and a place where everyone in our community can thrive. Housing, the cost of living, and recruitment and retention are our 3 points now of relentless focus. Work has already begun with the mini-budget, and we were grateful for the Assembly's support for that £56 million package of targeted support. That was followed by a significant increase in the minimum wage, work to introduce free school meals, and providing free sanitary products. The ministerial plans also include £10 million to support affordable purchases, take action on vacant homes, the licensing of rental dwellings, opening the housing gateway to more people, and the delivery of a long-term housing strategy. We have announced the St Saviour's Hospital site as a location for affordable and key worker accommodation, with more sites to be released as soon as possible. On the economy, our position is clear: to create a sustainable, innovative and outward-facing economy where we equip local people with the skills that they need for the jobs of the future and ensure that businesses can access the people, staff and skills they need to thrive. We will support our children and their families as the bedrock of our aim to establish a strong and cohesive island community. I've long been an advocate of focusing on the early years of a child's life. Those crucial first 1001 days are proven to be instrumental in every child's life chances. Our policy recognises the importance of those early interventions, which will have long-term dividends. And indeed, I am sympathetic to the aim of free primary healthcare for children as an aim. We also recognise that as people age, they must be valued, respected and supported. Like many places, our population is getting older, so we must prepare to care for them whilst protecting the opportunities for our future generations. This brings me to health and well-being. The Assembly is, of course, well aware of the review into clinical governance, which was published a couple of months ago. As the Health Minister has said, Jersey does not yet receive the standard of healthcare that it deserves. This has to change. We've already published our turnaround plan, and its implementation has begun. We must listen to patients and their families, to our staff, to GPs and other professionals as we shape and improve our services. On the environment, Jersey is a responsible international actor with some of the most ambitious carbon-neutral targets. As a government, we know this involves hard choices and costs, but we have to play our part. We also understand that so much of our well-being is tied into the environment in which we live. Finally, and certainly not least, our community is one of our priorities. This government wants a vibrant and inclusive Jersey, a community that is welcoming, where arts and culture and heritage are central, and where we feel safe and protected. This isn't just about protecting us from crime, but ensuring that we deliver preventative programmes and early interventions so that families live their best lives in a community where everyone thrives. So this is an ambitious programme. It is a clear programme, and it is one which we will measure our success against as we turn the curve and transform lives in each and every area of our priority. I would like to thank members, and I look forward to the debate.
Is the proposition seconded? Well, there is an amendment which is lodged by Deputy Coles, and I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
After the words report of this proposition, insert the words, except that on page 8 of the report, all instances of the word customer shall be substituted with the word people.
Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. I brought this amendment simply because I believe that referring to the whole population of our island as customers within the Common Strategic Policy is wrong. Our population is made up of people, and our government Our population is made up of people, and our government should always be people-focused. We may hear arguments that this is part of a government value structure, but this value structure is based on a corporate value structure. We need to remember and be reminded that the government is not a corporation, and as the State's Assembly, it is our responsibility to do this. We may hear that being customer-focused helps to engage employees within the government within the government to focus on delivering a first-class customer experience. But where is the value for the government employee? During their employment, are they customers or are they people? Customer focus may be appropriate for some functions within government, but certainly not all. We must consider how sections of government may consider their focus, and if we consider them to be customer focused, who would their customer be? Justice and Home Affairs, this is our police, customs, fire and rescue, to name but a few. Are they customer focused or are they community focused? Do they have customers? Are their customers the people that are victims of crime, victims of fire, or people travelling into our island from abroad? I wouldn't consider these people customers, but I would consider them all people. And on a slightly related note, we have just received an email from our Viscount's department, which actually says on their letterhead at the bottom, investors in people. Education and young people, teachers are student focused. Are students customers? Health and community services say that they would say they're patient focused. And patients in hospital, as long as Reform Jersey are here, will never be customers. Let's not forget our employees carrying out services. Our teachers are not customers. Our nurses are not customers. Our doctors are not customers. Our firefighters are not customers. Our police officers, our customs and immigration officers are not customers. Our judiciary are not customers. Our frontline and background staff at CLS and tax are not customers. What are we all? We are all people. We should recognise this within our common strategic policy. I was glad to read in the Council of Ministers' comments on this amendment that putting the change from customer to people on their internal survey, and I hope that this happens, and we continue to ask the right questions to remember the human side of government. However, the CSP is our time as the Assembly and the government to have our overarching perspective on the population as a whole, and to have our say whether we are customers or are we people. And I hope you will all choose people. Thank you.
Is the amendment seconded? Conor St John.
Thank you, sir. Sir, page 8 of the CSP are our values. So there are good arguments for different terms: customer, people, citizen, island, islander, pupil, patient, client, etc., etc. However, the term customer was adopted by the previous State's Employment Board following engagement with our staff. I believe it's very important for us not to change the wording of the values without proper staff involvement. When reviewing the values, the Council of Ministers agreed to continue with the values as they exist and even adopted them as part of their Code of Conduct and Practice, the Ministerial Code. What we do need to do is to spend more time and energy in embedding the values that we already have. We are customers, internal and external customers. So at times, sir, those teachers, fire workers, etc. are customers when they're accessing the services of HR, for example, Treasury. We all are customers at times. We're a diverse organisation. We offer a wide variety of services, from healthcare to education, road maintenance to tax services. Our services are both transactional, such as payments of tax and receipt of recycling, and relationship-based services, such as social work and employment support. We use the term customer to describe any individual organisation that accesses our services. The use of the word customer helps define the mindset and lens through which to view the provision of government services. On a personal note, sir, I can give many examples of this, including when I worked in a school. Having observed what was happening, it became apparent to me very quickly that rather than thinking of the parents as just that, parents, we should actually think more along the lines of the parents being customers and listen to what they were asking us for. The second example I'll give you was more recently when I became constable. Having watched how we dealt with parishioners, I explained to the team that we need to think about clients as customers first and parishioners second. In both examples, the individual is still treated as that, an individual, but the change in mindset of the person providing the service is notable. The parish hall opening hours have extended by a third to make it easier for those who want to use our traditional services, whilst at the same time we've seen significant uptake on online usage. I should say the additional opening was achieved at no additional cost. It's been achieved by the team recognising the customers' different needs and being flexible to provide them. Having a customer ethos is about an organisation showing that it really cares about its customers and keeps its promises. It means engaging with customers in the way in which they want to engage, not forcing them down one particular route. So customer ethos does bring in personalisation, showing that you care about your customer and treat them as an individual rather than stereotyping them or sweeping them up in a big, generic category. We've seen the success of the Closer to Home initiative, most recently tax advisors being available at various locations around the island, a good example of the organisation responding to people's needs. Sir, the State Employment Board have committed to meeting directly with staff representative groups, and this has been welcomed by them as it hasn't happened since 2017. In addition, we are currently out to consultation on 6 policy documents, including partnership working. Whilst I recognise the Deputy's good intentions, I don't feel it is right to impose this change without engaging with the very people who came up with the values. As our website states, great values are at the heart of every good organisation. Our values and behaviours framework were designed by our people. They shape our culture and drive our behaviour. Values are more than words. Values are actions. They are evident in everything that we do, as individuals and as an organisation. We bring our values to life through everyday interactions, as well as through our bigger initiatives. And we should not look at one value in isolation. And if I can remind members of our 5 core values and behaviour statements. We are respectful. We care about people as individuals and show respect for their rights, views and feelings. We are better together. We share knowledge and expertise, valuing the benefits of working together. We are always improving. We're continuously developing ourselves and our services to be the best they can be for Jersey. We are customer focused. We're passionate about making Jersey a better place to live and work for everyone. We deliver. We're proud of Jersey as a place and are passionate about shaping and delivering a great public service. So I'm happy to commit to exploring questions around terminology more in the next Be Heard survey and will respect the views that our staff express. Sir, I'd respectfully ask members to reject this amendment. Thank you.
Deputy Hull.
Thank you, sir. I really respect what the Constable of St John has just said, but I am a person. I'm a customer when I go to buy things from a shop, but I think in the terms of the government plan, we should be people and islanders. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. I wholeheartedly agree with what Deputy Howes just said, and I'm tempted to just sit down on that basis. But if I can stretch it out a bit anyway. Sir, I used to work in retail, and the people who I encountered on a day-to-day basis certainly were customers, and the way we could tell that they were customers is because they were coming in with money and asking for something for it, and that relationship strikes me as entirely appropriate in that context. So when I go see a doctor, I don't really regard myself as a customer, I regard myself as a patient. I hope that my doctor regards me as a patient rather than someone to simply make money from in that instance. So when I went to school, I was not a customer, I was a student, and I seriously hope, and in fact I know, my teachers did not consider me their customer, they considered me a student. When I get on a bus, I hope I'm seen as a passenger rather than a customer. Okay, I am paying for that service, but I hope with the care and attention that the bus driver and the service provider are paying, that they see it as a passenger-focused service as opposed to a customer one. And of course, we can go on and look at all sorts of different examples of that. But I think the fact remains that in many people's eyes, that word customer has an association with the exchange of money for something. And that doesn't encapsulate the entire relationship that people have with their government. In fact, there are many people who, whilst they receive services from government, are not either directly or indirectly contributing any money towards it. Children who don't pay tax are not paying for the services that they rely on. They're not customers, they're children, they're people, they're students, they're patients, they're whatever they are when interacting with that particular government service. And it simply isn't the case for me that when I've spoken to people who are very passionate about the jobs that they do, the services that they provide, in many of those services, that they just don't regard the people that they entered their careers to serve as customers. They see them as patients, they see them as students, they see them as people. So, you know, I don't think the government has had any bad intention in proposing this, but it does, I think, just sit uneasy with those of us who represent people out there. When somebody comes to me to ask for my help as a deputy, I don't see them as a customer, I see them as a constituent. And that is exactly how it should be, and that's how we should define those relationships. The word that Deputy Coles has chosen to supplant the word customer here is encapsulating of all of those. And if this can be further developed in the next survey of public servants, then that will certainly be a good thing. But I really hope that we're not moving to the corporatisation of this kind of language where we don't value people for who and what they are.
Deputy Miller.
Thank you, sir. I'd just like to emphasise what Constable Géant has said. I'd also just like to point out that these values belong to our public service. They don't belong to the Council of Ministers. They don't belong to this Assembly. I joined public service in 2015, and I first became aware of these values in largely their existing form in 2015. The public service have been applying these for many years now. If you go into the CLS building, the parts of that building are decorated in these colours. They have really, the staff in this organisation have really thrown themselves behind these values, and CLS aren't alone. In my experience, there are very many public services who live and breathe these values, who are really doing their best to provide good services to our islanders. Now, you can call them whatever you want. They're patients. Of course, they're patients, they're students. They may be customers. They may be, depending on the transaction, they may be businesses. They may be quite big businesses. But these belong to our staff. They are, some of them have really made a huge amount. They feed into our Stars Awards that some of us will have attended recently, where 1,500 staff were applauded for living these values. And I think we need to be very careful about focusing on a word when really what we're trying to represent is an ethos, which is everybody doing their very best for the members of the public that they are serving as public servants. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy. Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. When I saw this amendment come in and it flashed up on my phone, I thought, what a simple and elegant amendment. I sound like a broken record to many of the officers I have meetings with often when I hear the phrase customer, and it gets to me. I prefer citizen, I prefer organisation. But then I did look at where within the common strategic priorities this amendment aims to change. And I do feel this is the wrong place for us to be changing this. The Constable of St John has outlined exactly where these values come from. So whilst I don't think this is the right place to be supporting it, I will continue to sound like a broken record within government, and I will be urging the forms such as the Be Heard survey to be used to look at a better narrative within government over the next 4 years.
Deputy Felton.
Thank you, sir. When I looked at this amendment, obviously as a previous public servant and hearing what the Constable of St John and Deputy Miller has said, I too know of the values. However, being a public servant for 5 years and those values having been in place for that time, I can say I was never asked what I thought of those values. I didn't feel that those values necessarily belonged to the staff. And very often in my union leadership role, whenever the values were mentioned, people would roll their eyes and say, what does that mean? So my word of caution, I think, to the Constable of St John is that when you do the Be Heard survey, there may well be some more important things than this wording that you need to be dealing with first. But back to this wording and our role with it. We are leaders within public service. We have a leadership role, and it is our role as the States Assembly to set our stall as to what kind of public service we wish to lead. Now, for me, I'm here to serve the people of Jersey. I don't see the people that I serve as my customers. I don't have transactions with them, and I want them to live their very best lives. So for me, that is why this is the place for us to be showing that leadership and to be changing that word within our document, and then, or the government's document, I should say, as a backbencher. But through us showing that leadership then perhaps that can lead to a different dialogue and conversation for the States Employment Board. But please don't fall for the rhetoric around these values belonging to the public sector and it being chosen by the staff that are there, because I'm sure if you spoke to many of the, 6,000 or 7,000 staff, they would all question this terminology as well, and they would say, no, that doesn't represent my view.
Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. Well, Deputy Felton's taken some words out of my mouth, because I looked at this page. We strongly endorse the existing values of our public service. And I thought, well, values actually lead. And who actually is leading who? The existing values of our public service. And yet we hear that you want a value for money review. We hear that we want changes in the public service. So I did sort of find myself sympathising to some extent with Deputy Coles's proposition, particularly, and notwithstanding that, I do take issue with some sort of arguments that have been put forward by, say, Deputy Messick, like school corporate standards are a really bad thing. I don't actually particularly think when it comes to things like the management of conflict of interest, that they're necessarily a bad thing. I often find that the conflict of interest management standards are superior. I do have some issues with managers of cost centres funded by government being called chief executive officers. That's not really corporate in my mind, and not in the mind of many whom I know in the business community. So my problem isn't with this idea of corporate standards, it's how the real values that you focus on in terms of improving the organisation to take the best of organisational standards, whether they're corporate or not. So I remain unconvinced by the arguments I've heard by government so far supporting this particular use of this terminology, and I await to be convinced.
Deputy Ferry.
Thank you, sir. So the use of the word customer in this context helps to define the mindset and lens through which to view the provision of government services. All users of government services are citizens with rights and expectations, and ultimately they are people with emotional and physical needs. This is whether they are interacting with the government as individuals or on behalf of organisations. The use of the term customer seeks to define and highlight the importance of meeting those needs. In Jersey, we have frameworks to allow for a more service-tailored approach in departments. In healthcare, for example, translating our customer-focused value into a patient-centred approach to healthcare. I urge members to reject this amendment, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. This is my favourite amendment of all of the amendments, because it goes to the heart of what we are. I was a public servant, 20, I don't know how many years here, and in the UK. And it's been mentioned that, seeing parents as customers is productive. The parents of the students that I taught, particularly those in my form, I never saw as customers. I saw them as people that I had a relationship with, because during the daytime, and now, sir, you can correct me on my Latin, I'm sure, I was in loco parentis. That's the role of a teacher. You are their parent while they're at school. I believe it's a legal definition somewhere along the line. And you took that responsibility incredibly seriously. It has implications, sir. So, for example, you wouldn't just send a child, a young person home. You had to make sure they were safe. If they had nowhere to go, you didn't just dump them out on the street. You made sure they were safe from where they were going, because you took on that parental role. You cared for that person. It wasn't a customer, and it's not a customer. It's a person. I've had, with police authority that I've sat on and through the Home Affairs panel, I've spoken to the police a lot, and I know they want as much as possible to teach the individual as a person, often with issues, perhaps not doing the right thing, but they're having to deal with people. In the health service, dealings with the health service, I want to be treated as a person. Really important to me that I'm treated as a person when I go in a vulnerable position with your healthcare, whether you see a doctor or whatever. And in terms of customer and local services, is that what it's called, customer and local services? The word's already there by definition. I get that. But they're dealing with people, and they're dealing with vulnerable people. And I think that everybody who works there wants to see the person they're dealing with as a person. Now, there's some really challenging cases, and there are really challenging experiences that they have to deal with. And the people who are there are challenging at times. But I think this is a way more important semantic change than we realise. Because what we're talking about is our common strategic policy, the strategic approach to the way that we treat islanders, to the people that we come across, be it as states members, be it as teachers, as nurses, as doctors, as civil servants of all shapes and forms. And what we deal with is people. And so by putting this word there, it gives a clear message to everybody. What you can expect from the public service is to be treated as a human being. And that may be a small thing to many, but it's so important to our people, particularly when they're vulnerable and particularly when they're needy. And I'll finish with one thing, sir. Every teacher on this island doesn't just have objects in front of them that are consumers of a commodity. That's one of the biggest issues that's faced education over the last 20 years, the commoditisation of our education. Look up the global educational reform movement, where we have commoditised all of our children's learning, and it has done damage to our children. And so therefore, treating them as people, as every single educator on this island wants to do, from nursery to sixth form to Highlands College to everywhere, is such an important point to have. And this is about leadership. And Deputy Feltham was right, and I thought what she said was wonderful. It's about how we are as leaders. So, come on. Deputy Coles has come up with a really good idea here, sir. And he's thought about this. And so I urge people to support it. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Andrews.
Thank you, sir. Now, when I read the amendment, I have to say I'm very complimentary of Deputy Coles for bringing this forward, because actually I think it's a very poignant thing to do. We have to realise that the government is actually providing provisions, so they're providing services for people. And actually, is there a medium of exchange every single time somebody has an inquiry with the government? No, that is not the case. There is not a transaction. Okay, we are not speaking about products and services, and that's something that we would be alluding to, for instance, within the private sector. So I will be supporting the Deputy's amendment. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Reynolds.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to return ourselves a little bit to the actual thing that is being proposed here, the amendment that's been proposed, which is to replace the word customer in the values section, and just put that in the proper context to which it actually sits in the document. It sits in the Common Strategic Policy on the page on our values, and what we've placed here is a very uncontroversial statement in that we strongly endorse the existing values of our public service. These are the existing values of our public service. I know not as much as Deputy Feltham about how they were derived, but they are the existing values of our public service. It is, the existing values are not we are people focused, they are we are customer focused. Now, the question has been raised quite legitimately about how we treat people. Are they customers? Are they people? Are they clients? Are they patients? Or whatever. These values encompass all of those options. First value, we are respectful. We care about people as individuals and show respect for their rights, views, and feelings. This document, this section on our values, encompasses all those variety of ways in which we interact with government. All we are doing in putting this into the common strategic policies is saying, as we do underneath that section, we will lead by example, demonstrating these values ourselves and holding the public service to account in its adoption of these values in everything it does. That is the intent of putting this in here. Our intent is not to renegotiate the values of the public service, which, as Constable Jehan has already pointed out, is something that we would have to involve, if we're being right and proper about this, involve the public service in. This section of the Common Strategic Policy simply restates what is the values and commits us as a Council of Ministers to supporting those values in their entirety, including in the ways that we refer to people as people rather than as customers. All those things are to be read together, not picked out as and have one little change tweaked here and there. They sit together as a core set of values, in my view.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Honourable Centennial.
Thank you, sir. I wasn't going to enter this debate because it does seem to me to be a matter of semantics, and I'm not sure it will make any difference one way or the other to the outcome of the common strategic policy. However, sounding a touch cynical, one could ask whether any of the amendments are going to make any difference to the outcome. However, having said that, I've been thinking about the phrase customer care and how important it's been in my time as Constable of St Helier, and how I've tried to inculcate customer care through the organisation which I head up. And it's a really important concept. It's about treating people who come through the door with respect, with patience, with courtesy, and not simply, and I'm not going to suggest that any of my staff would ever do this, but not treating people as a bit of a nuisance because it's been a long day or because they've been in before, and we've answered that question already, we don't want to answer it again, or if it's over the telephone, this person was quite abusive last time and I'm tempted to put the phone down on them. Customer care is about always treating the people we serve with respect and courtesy. And that's why I think it's an important word to keep in the Common Strategic Plan. I think the word people is great, and it's slightly obvious because, of course, all of our customers in public service are people, and we respect them as people as well. But for me, the word customer is important because, as I say, it does catch this concept of working for the public and respecting the people we serve. Thank you, sir.
Any other member wish to speak on the amendment?
So I rather do agree with the Constable of St Helier that it probably doesn't make a great deal of difference. But on the other hand, words are important, and I looked up the dictionary definition of a customer. And a customer is a person who buys goods or services from a shop or business, which is rather what Deputy Howell was saying earlier on. And it simply does not embrace many of the things with which the public service is engaged or involved in. It's not all money-based, not all money-orientated. It's to do with service and duty and caring in different contexts. And I must say I've never liked the word customer in this context, and so I'm going to support Deputy Coles.
Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. I would like to ask members, if possible, to look at the page 8, just to open page 8 in front of you. It is really important that you would connect to the page that I'm talking about, and this is the page. When I saw amendment as Deputy Curtis, I was, yes, people, because I'm really a people person. People are important. And I feel that it's really important to connect to the people. And I started to look through our common strategic policy to understand where in the common strategic policy we mentioned customers. And I couldn't find, and I needed to do command find, basically to see where the words. And in our common strategic policy, we used a lot of people, but we used only twice what customers, and it's even not our words, and it's only on this page. One, it's in red, we are customer focused, and second is in red, we are customer focused down, saying we are passionate about making Jersey a better place to live and work to everyone. At the same value we are respecting, we care about people. People are there in the values. And if you're looking on the top of this page, we are strongly endorse the existing values of our public service. It's something that we are adopted. It's not we adopted, we are endorsing it. And I think there is a really valid point, and probably I would encourage States Employment Board to go back to the public service, because they have developed these values. This is their values, and we can suggest and we can work with them together to change these 2 words, because this is only 2 words which are extremely important. We are talking about people, but what people also there as customers, and we need to treat them as both. Thank you. When you are considering your vote, consider what we're actually changing, if it's common strategic policy or public service existing values, and it's important that we'll do it in consultation.
Very much. Conor Harbison-Clement.
Sir, I don't like the word customer because I've been in a business which dictates that the customer is always right. So I've amended that since I got into a little bit of authority, and I've taught our staff to say, well, yes, the customer is always right, but sometimes people are wrong. The problem with focusing on the word customer is that psychologically you're inclined to give a customer what he or she is entitled to. Nothing more and nothing less. But I prefer to look at the person and give them more. Listen to them. There is deviation to what they might need, which might not be laid down in statute, legislation, etc., etc. And I believe that psychologically the word people is more all-embracing. And I think if you were to ask the customer in the street, they prefer to be called people.
Thank you, sir. And I rise to agree with the previous speaker, Deputy Balash, who summed it up very succinctly when he said, words are important. And I think the words we use when we have dealings with people do set a context that dictate the boundaries of our relationships. And in this case, I do not want to be dealing with my voters, you, this group of people, as customers. I do not wish to be treated as a customer unless I'm in a shop. And that's the only situation in which I'm content to be a customer. So people for me, far more important than customers.
Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. Deputy Feltham talked about leadership in her speech, and she's absolutely right. But as the Constable of St John outlined in his speech earlier on, he described how the States Employment Board has taken the decision to adopt the values of our organisation. Those values were set following a survey and a consultation with our people who defined these very values amongst themselves. So I would simply ask the Assembly in this particular instance to stick with the people of our organisation and the setting of their values, and to adopt the word customer in this particular instance for that very reason, because it does show leadership and it does show us listening to the very people who are on the front line and deal with the people of Jersey on a day-to-day basis on our behalf and with our direction in many instances. And we're all extremely grateful to them for doing that. I think also the Constable of St John mentioned that we will ask the question of them again about this particular description and word, and ask for their views in the next Be Heard survey, because that is a right and proper way to do it, to go back to the people who set the values and check in and make sure that they're absolutely correct and happy with this continuing interpretation of the word. And whilst we're on the matter of interpretations, I think the Constable of St Helier quite rightly summed up why this word was chosen, because it was about being that customer-focused, as it says in the value approach, and inculcating it into our service and our practice on a day-to-day basis, rather than, as has been inferred, commoditising what we do, because we are, of course, one public service. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Chief Minister. Deputy Hegarah.
Thank you, sir. I think I can beat Deputy Ward. I've worked mostly all my life, which is 43 years, within the States. I recall, actually, this terminology coming in as customers, and I've been retired from the police for 8 years, so it's in excess of that 8 years. And I don't recall actually being consulted about it. We were told that we were going to be called, but everybody was going to be called customers. I don't recall actually being asked what I would prefer to call people. From my perspective, I don't like the word customer. I genuinely believe that we are dehumanising people by calling them customers and not calling them people, whether that be a student or somebody we deal with in relation to other things. So from my perspective, I don't particularly like the terminology as a customer. I think it does, as I said, dehumanise people. And so therefore, I think as an assembly, that I think we should make that change, because I don't disagree that SEB can actually ask our employees. But if we're going to ask our employees, sir, I expect 6,000 people to give their opinion on whether they believe we should be calling people customers or people. So therefore, I would hope that this was more of a widespread discussion rather than that which was imposed, because I genuinely believe that it was probably imposed on us and not actually a decision made by the employees. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. Listening to the debate, it is interesting. It seems like we're torn between two things. One, which is the discussion of whether customer or people is the better term to use. And I have strong sympathy with the idea that actually it should be people. But unfortunately, Deputy Coles has chosen the one part of the Common Strategic Policy which is not ours. It's not the States Assembly's part. Those aren't the States Assembly's values. They're the values of the public service, as decided in consultation, I think more recently than when Deputy Lehegra was last employed by the public service. I believe these values were done the last term of the state. And unfortunately, so we could change these, but that changes it in this document. It doesn't change it elsewhere, because we aren't here to be consulted on what we think the values of the public service should be. It is quite right that it is the members of the public service, and I find it interesting, Deputy Balash, who I believe is a member of the States Employment Board, is effectively saying, let's override what the people that Deputy Balash is meant to be representing through his work on the State's Employment Board have said. So I think it's really difficult for us as an assembly to say, actually, we're going to override you, the people who work for us, and whilst we're doing that, we're going to override you whilst couching it in terms of belief in the value of people. So if the Assembly can't see the incredible irony of us espousing this belief in the term of the word people and how we're going to be all-inclusive and encompassing, whilst at the same time completely riding roughshod over the views of the people themselves, it astounds me. So I can't support this amendment, because a proper amendment in this area would have been to request the Council of Ministers to go back and engage in consultation with members of the public service, employed by the public service, to see whether they prefer the word people or customer on this page. That would be the appropriate amendment to get this changed. Asking us to directly dictate exactly what the values are from the people who work there is exactly that, it's dictatorial. And we shouldn't engage in that. That's not right. This is the one part of the Common Strategic Policy which isn't the Council of Ministers part of. It's the one part. Deputy Coles has picked the one page that isn't ours. And as I said, the irony of couching it in terms of being respectful to other people's views and what we all are, and yet dictating to those people exactly what they shall have as their values, isn't lost on me, and I hope it's not lost on the Assembly. So I do ask, but I think we've heard from the Chief Minister that it is right that we do go back and ask the public service if they would like to change that, but that's the right way to do it, is to ask the people who work for us. It's not to dictate to those people what they should have. And so please do reject this amendment. We will, I believe, go off and ask that question. But this isn't the right way to do it. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Ozu.
Thank you, sir. Very briefly. Sir, when I know that Reform are very much in favour of the New Deal that was brought in about in the United States in 1933. One of those was Franklin Roosevelt's signing of the American Adjustment Act that was designed to jumpstart the livelihoods of American farmers. Nobody was thinking that in those days farmers were customers. In reality, what has happened in the public sector in the last 100 years is about making lasting changes to citizens who are facing difficult times. It's been a century since that landmark act, which Reform very much likes, I do too, but there's been also a massive shift over the decades about the mentality of treating citizens not just as service recipients, but as customers. I can find dictionary definitions that deal with customers that are wider than just simply buying services. We could have an argument, if we like, about customers and clients. There are dictionary definitions that I could say to Deputy Balash. The whole shift to the word customer is about shaping what are worldwide trends in the public sector. Historically, government services have been delivered from the inside out, based upon bureaucracies and how they're structured. But leading government organisations are shifting that, putting services from the start on the outside, orientating their programmes around customers. We all know what that means. It means customer-focused instead of bureaucracy-driven government. It's all debate. It's all about a debate about enabling what technology and how one should treat citizens as customers of government. We know what that means. We need to think about the public sector. We need to support. I endorse entirely the observations that both the Councillor St John and the Deputy Chief Minister, the Economic Development Minister, has said. It would be wrong to impose it. I applaud our public sector in moving towards a customer-based, focused organisation that will do innovative things, like having survey cards, thinking about how they're dealing with individuals, how they're following up on their customer care. All of those things. The word customer means something more than just people. It means treating with respect. It's not about payment, but people do pay taxes. If you really want to have a debate about payment, people pay taxes. Some people don't, but they're paid by taxpayers. At the heart of it is part of a global organisation, a global movement to regard people that consume government services, that are their right, and that they have a right to be treated in the way that a commercial organisation traditionally does
treats individuals. That's what this is about, but we should not do this. We should not make this decision. It's for the people at the front line. It's for the employees to make that decision. And I say, well done, the public sector. You are treating customers, you're treating people better and better, and we should encourage that and not impose a word which is not ours to do. But I support our public sector in all the good customer-facing work that they do, whether it's at the parish of St Saviour, the parish of St Helier, or in our public sector across the piece. And I hope members will reject the proposition in that spirit. Thank you, sir.
Much Deputy Kovac.
Thank you, sir. What I want to say in respect to what Deputy Morrell said, we're not changing the values. We're just looking at the word customer as a holistic approach. The customer and local services, let's say, has its own right to use the word customer because there are services more tailored toward customers. I've been also part of the public service for the last 2 years, which I think a lot of part of the states members in this assembly have been as well. And as has been stated, I don't think any of us have been asked if we like to be called customers or not. I've been completed that Be Heard survey, and not once I've been asked if I like to be called customer. And based on that, I think people encompasses more of what all the other services then, other than customer and local services are providing shows. So that's why, to me, the word customers sits where more services tailored are, and everyone else should be people. Thank you.
Much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? No other member wishes to speak on this amendment? I close the debate and call upon Deputy Coles to respond.
Thank you, sir. I first would like just to address the bit about imposing these values onto the public service. In the report under the financial and manpower implications, it says, if the government consider, and that says the government, not the Council of Ministers, if the government consider my arguments persuasive and are moved to amend their values in this small way, there will be a minor manpower implication. This means that they are able, if they choose to adopt what we say, which we suggest is a better value for them to take in, that they can do so if they choose to. Should the survey go out and come back with the same argument. I was so close to being able to congratulate Deputy Ozif on almost not using the term people before using the word customers. You were so adamantly using citizen most of the way through, but you slipped up at the end. And nearly everybody who's debated about this has referred to every single time before they've used the word customer, they've used the word people, because people do come first. And it's clear that people come first. Even the Chief Minister, in her opening remarks for the CSP in its entirety, did not use the word customer, but she used the word people at least 3 times. I did stop counting, but I got to 3 and I thought that was enough. Again, and Deputy Gardner mentions that in the CSP as well, that people appears more. In fact, it appears 23 times. Customer appears twice. So surely we are people-focused. So this value should say that we are people-focused. And I'm just going to leave it there because, for me, it is that simple. We need to maintain we are people-focused. Everybody who comes here are people. They're not always citizens. We have foreign workers who may not be British citizens, but they'll still interact with our government. They are still people. We are all people. Our value should be putting people first. And I call for the appel, sir.
As called for, I invite members to return to their seats. I'll ask the greffier to open the voting. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The proposition has been defeated. 23 votes pour, 24 votes contre.
Could we hear the 24 customers, please, sir?
Those voting contre, the Connétables of St Helier, St Peter, St John, Bruville, St Mary. Deputies Labby, Morell, Ayer, Gardner, Gorst, Moore, Osoph, War, Miles, Reniff, Rose Binet, Jeune, Miller, Tom Binet, Ferry, Curtis and Wilson. And in the chat, Deputy Stevenson and the Connétable of St Lawrence voted contre.
Well, we come to the next amendment, which is the Sixth Amendment lodged by Deputy Mezek, and I ask the greffier to read that amendment.
After the words report of this proposition, insert the words, except that on page 11 of the report, 1, in the third paragraph, the words housing matters should be substituted with the words Jersey has a housing crisis. 2, in the fourth paragraph, after the words housing ladder, there should be inserted the following words. We will do this by increasing the proportion of homes required to be designated as affordable in large private sector developments, introducing a first right of refusal for private sector tenants to purchase their homes when their landlord decides to sell, and establishing a shared equity scheme to support first-time buyers attempting to purchase their first homes in the private sector using the £10 million fund set aside in previous government plans. 3, in the fourth paragraph, after the words housing stock, there should be inserted the following words. We will do this by requiring all homes built on publicly owned land to be for first-time buyers, social rental housing, or downsizers, and introducing an empty property tax. 4, in the sixth paragraph, after the words improve the quality, there should be inserted the words and affordability. 5, in the sixth paragraph, after the words tenants and landlords, there should be inserted the words, we will do this by reintroducing the landlord licensing scheme originally proposed by previous environment and housing ministers, proposing a new residential tenancy law to provide for European-style rent stabilisation and open-ended tenancies, moving to a means-tested system for calculating social housing rents, and implementing the recommendations of the homelessness strategy. 2, page 2, after the words report of this proposition, insert the words except that on page 18 of the report, 1, in the continue to improve section of the table for housing and cost of living, the words increase the percentage of islanders who are very satisfied with their housing should be substituted with the words increase the number of private rental homes with 5-star accreditation with rent safe. And 2, in the turn the curve section of the table for housing and cost of living, after the words housing that is affordable, there should be inserted the following words. Decrease the proportion of renters classed as living in rental stress. Reduce the numbers of homes left vacant without adequate excuse. Increase the proportion of young adults who own their own home. And decrease the average waiting times for those listed on the Affordable Housing Gateway for rehousing.
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased to have this opportunity to address my fellow customers in the hope that they will buy this amendment. Sir, the purpose of this amendment is to add to the key priority of housing and cost of living some detail, some meat on the bone, which as a vegetarianist analogy I find problematic, but hopefully can be accepted on this occasion. It's to provide more credibility and confidence that there are meaningful commitments being made. It turns it from nice words, and they are nice, they are excellent words in this, but it turns them from more than just nice words, but to a real action plan. So the high-level ambitions which are noted in the CSP are laudable. In fact, nobody, I would hope, would disagree with any of them. So they include, for example, we will increase the supply of new affordable homes and make more homes available for our key workers to secure our most important public services for the future. Completely agree, and I'd be amazed if anybody didn't think that that was an absolutely worthy aspiration. It says we will improve the quality of rental accommodation and introduce more protection for private rental tenants, increasing security of tenure and fairness for both landlords and tenants. Absolutely agree with that as well. And we will release publicly owned sites for housing development. We will enable islanders to right-size when they want to, and we will help to return vacant homes to the market, making the most of our existing housing stock. I'd be annoyed if there was anyone in this assembly that didn't think that those were worthy ambitions. I hope we all agree with those, and I hope that we'll all seek to play a part in whatever form to advance those causes. But those words and aspirations are familiar. They are aspirations that have been brought up in this assembly before. They are aspirations that previous governments have alleged that they've been committed to. And so it's fair to ask the question, seeing these nice words on a sheet of paper now, what's different to previous times? Previous governments may say they really meant it, and this one may say it really, really means it, and that's great. But what adds to the credibility of that is a clear action plan to deliver on those, leaving less room for more deliberations, consultations, or reviews, but a clear determination, this is what we're going to do, and then from that point, we hold them to account on delivery. The intentions aren't enough. We do need to see greater detail on what will actually be done to advance the laudable statements which are in the CSP. So, sir, in advance of the general election this year, when we put our policies together, we produced a document which we said to our voters this would be what we would seek to pursue if we were elected. And we do that, and in bringing this amendment, we're seeking to fulfil that democratic mandate. That's the way things ought to be. We did it so it would provide a basis for us so work could proceed quickly. We wouldn't need to resort to more reviews, deliberations, or consultations, but we'd be focused on delivery rather than more time being spent putting policies together when we are in a housing crisis and we need that action as soon as possible. And what we included in that plan was, I'm happy to admit, largely a case of plagiarisation. Most of what was in that action plan were not things that we, in the 5 minutes before the election, decided, let's just put these words on a sheet of paper and hope they make sense. The vast majority of that plan and its action points were taken from comprehensive reports that had already been done, some of which had contributions from our party members towards, but also had contributions from other members from across political divides as well. We chose those action points because they were credible, because there had already been consultation on them, because they had already been reviewed, and what we needed was the political commitment that they're the right things to do, and then we focus on delivery rather than going back to the drawing board and saying, oh, actually, are there other policies we ought to be looking at instead? And so in bringing this amendment to the CSP, what we are undeniably doing is putting to this Assembly the most comprehensive and clear action plan for States members to get behind that has ever been in this Assembly before. We occasionally get standalone propositions, we occasionally get propositions that say we'll think about this or we'll review that, but as a body of policies, this does constitute the most comprehensive that has been put to this Assembly, and it will, if adopted, save further time and money and reviewing and dedicate more time to action, and we can then hold ministers to account in the delivery of those actions. There will be an amendment to this which we'll debate after this, and I'll address some of the arguments to that in that debate. There is a reference in the report to that, though, to the Housing Minister's ministerial plan, suggesting that as part of the overall government programme, that ought to be where we look to find more detail in what's going to be delivered as part of the response to the housing crisis. And that's fine, but that ministerial plan does repeatedly refer to further policy development. It talks about more work being done when we have had successive governments attempt to do lots of that work, only for then reports and recommendations to end up sat on a shelf gathering dust, when what would be better is as early as possible in this term for the States Assembly, the government and the Minister to say, okay, these are the points that we're going to go ahead and deliver. And then the role of this assembly becomes to hold them to account on that delivery, make sure that any legislation that comes here to enact it is well drafted, to make sure that any ongoing service provision is well funded. That then becomes the debate, rather than going in circles, debating principles, and seemingly getting no further forward on that. But the bits that are referred to in the ministerial plan that overlap with some of what's in this plan, I actually don't think are in conflict whatsoever. The Minister refers in his ministerial plan to things like the bring forward a scheme of some sort to improve the quality of private rental housing. We've seen the press release from the Environment Minister recently providing more detail on that, and I can say to the government that that has our wholehearted support, so long as when the regulations reach the Assembly that they're well drafted, and we'll play a constructive role in pushing that along if necessary. Hopefully that won't be required though. But that's aligned with what's proposed in this. The ministerial plan also refers to action to tackle excessive rent increases. That's also addressed in this plan. I'll come on to that shortly. And the rest of the ministerial plan, or other aspects of the ministerial plan, refer to more data collection. And of course, you know, it's absolutely fine to collect more data to inform policies, but it can't be the only thing we do. We do have to, at some point, draw a line and decide to take action, rather than constantly say we don't have enough data to make decisions and end up going round in circles. So, sir, I'm going to go through the measures which are proposed in this housing crisis action plan that we're seeking to insert into this amendment, and explain why I think that they are good ideas, well researched, and why we can make that decision now to get behind them and give the government and the minister a mandate to then go on and deliver them. And I'll be very intrigued to hear any prospective arguments against these. So, sir, where the government says we will promote and support home ownership, aiding those looking to get on the housing ladder, in response to that laudable aim, we propose these actions. So if we want to support more people into home ownership, we need to increase the supply of affordable housing. A few people will disagree on that. The question then is how? We can do that in many different ways. We can do it by destroying every green field on the island if we wanted. I would hope we wouldn't support that, and there'd be a reluctance to consider that. So let's look at some things we can commit to that I hope would be uncontroversial. We can require affordable homes as a greater proportion to be delivered in large private sector developments. We can say that if you want to get planning permission for a large housing development in the private sector, a greater percentage of those homes ought to be reserved for affordable housing, to be distributed through some affordable mechanism, whether that's through the gateway or something equivalent. So we already do that a little bit. There is already a rule in the Bridging Island Plan that says if a private sector application is coming forward for a development of more than 50 homes, then the assumption is that planning permission will not be granted unless 15% of those homes are designated for affordable housing. That is a start, but it's not enough. I know that the culture of delivering affordable homes in private developments is now starting to set in. I had a very good conversation with those who are looking to develop the Romeril site, and they have said that they are seeking at least 15%, but they hope to deliver more on that. Good on them for that, I say. But we can, in time, increase that percentage to something more reasonable. I had actually initially proposed it being much higher when I brought the amendment to the Bridging Island Plan, but was talked down by that government just to get it over the line. But it's over the line now, so we can take a few more steps in that direction. A second idea that we can propose to help improve the supply of affordable housing without actually building new homes, but to help homes leave the investment market and into the hands of first-time buyers without disrupting any other supply issues, and that's to introduce a first right of refusal for private sector tenants to purchase their rental homes when the landlord decides to sell them. Sir, I am constantly in contact with constituents who come to me to tell me that they're being kicked out of the home that they've rented for years because the landlord has decided they want to sell the property, but they want to sell it with vacant possession and sell it on the open market that way, and the tenant has to leave before it's then put on the market. What we could do, sir, is to introduce a rule to say to those investors when they want to sell their properties, by all means, go ahead, that's your right to do that, but you ought to be required in the first instance to offer it at the market rate to the sitting tenant and give that tenant the opportunity without having to worry about being crushed in a stampede from investors who might be seeking to overtake them to buy that property, the opportunity to decide do they want to buy it or not, and if they can acquire a mortgage to do so, they can then go from tenant to homeowner then. Doesn't disrupt supply, doesn't prevent landlords from selling their properties when they want to, but it does allow tenants, instead of being evicted to enable a sale, to have that first opportunity with a step ahead from everybody else to acquire their homes. And I know that there will be many tenants who would like that ability were they offered it. And the third point under this headline, sir, is to establish a shared equity scheme to support first-time buyers attempting to purchase their first homes in the private sector using the £10 million fund set aside in previous government plans. So that £10 million pot of support for first-time buyers has been in successive government plans for a few years now. The reason it hasn't been used thus far was genuinely that the pandemic totally disrupted a whole load of work programmes. So unfortunately, it's been sat there untouched. It's still there. The government wants to spend it. I hope they spend every penny of it, and I hope they spend it as effectively as possible. And I hope we can look at some forms of mechanisms to top up that fund. I'm sure there are ways that that can be done as well. But we can get started and give the green light to the government to go ahead and use that funding by supporting islanders through a shared equity scheme to buy their first homes. I believe that that's one of the most effective ways you can help make home ownership affordable to people. I think it's better than a loan scheme, because a loan scheme is ultimately built on debt, whereas a shared equity scheme I think is better. It's because the government then retains some form of ownership and can determine to what degree how generous that shared equity scheme is to make the best use of it. And if we can find ways of recycling that money as well, it can provide a benefit in perpetuity. So, sir, those are three tangible proposals to improve the quality, to promote and support home ownership. So the next part of the CSP that I want to provide some suggestions for are we will increase the supply of new affordable homes and make more homes available for our key workers to secure our most important public services for the future. Well, there's one really, really good way of making sure we can provide those kinds of homes, and that is for the government to go to the bodies which it already owns and says to them, with the land that we own, you must do better than you currently are doing. And instead of taking publicly owned land which is ours and with which we can do essentially what we like with, instead of building homes that aren't targeted at the profile of need there is out in the island, require them instead that if they're building homes on that land, they ought to be for those who need it, measured through the mechanisms which we already have, like the first-time buyers gateway, for example. And yes, that means saying to organisations like the States Jersey Development Company that they'll need to relook at South Hill, that they'll need to relook at the waterfront. I personally believe that that policy is actually extremely popular. I believe that it is part of what caused the disillusionment in the previous government that saw them face such heavy defeats at the last election. And I know that some members of this current government were sympathetic to that view in their own manifestos. And of course, another thing we can do to bring more properties into use is to introduce an empty property tax. And we're waiting for the Minister to come back with his options for that, following the proposition earlier this year from Deputy Tadia, and I await that eagerly. So the third point made in the CSP is we will improve the quality of rental accommodation and introduce more protection for private rental tenants, increasing security of tenure and fairness for both tenants and landlords. That is music to my ears. I completely agree with that. I will, however, point out that there's one word that's conspicuously missing from that sentence, and it's after the word quality. We don't have the word affordability. I think that was an oversight that probably ought to have been included in that sentence, and this amendment seeks to put it in there. But it seeks to go further in proposing specific things that will have an impact on improving the quality of rental accommodation, improving security of tenure, and providing greater certainty for landlords and tenants when it comes to rents. So the first of those, I really hope, won't be controversial, and that is the reintroduction of the landlord licensing scheme originally proposed by previous environment and housing ministers, adopted by this Assembly, and then U-turned on shortly afterwards. So there have been headlines in the UK recently about the impact that poor quality housing can have on vulnerable people that are shocking and appalling. We know that there are homes in this island that do not meet minimum standards. And right now, despite the best efforts of environmental health and despite the legislation which does exist, which is meaningful and does make a difference, it doesn't go far enough to give them the tools they need to make sure that people in this island are not being exploited and living in homes which are not being maintained by their owners to an acceptable standard. I'm delighted that the Environment Minister has said he wants to reintroduce that. I seriously hope that he'll have the support from the whole of the government in pursuing that, and when we see the regulations when they are drafted, we'll go through them very carefully to make sure that they are fit for purpose and that they meet the promise that has been made by the Minister. So that line should be uncontroversial, I hope. So the next suggestion is to propose a new residential tenancy law to provide for European-style rent stabilisation and open-ended tenancies. Again, this is not something that I've made up. It's not something that Reform Jersey has made up. This is something which exists in lots of places in Europe, and it's something that was considered very carefully by the Housing Policy Development Board to judge whether that would be appropriate for Jersey. I'll explain what rent stabilisation means for those who don't know. But before going through that definition, sir, it was amusing to receive a communication last night from the Jersey Landlords Association, which passed a brief comment on this, and they described this as rent control which has been discredited by many economists. And I thought that was such a simplistic way, and frankly an inaccurate way, of looking at it, because there are many different kinds of rent control, of which rent stabilisation is just one of them. There's other mechanisms as well. There's rent caps, there's rent stabilisation. There's different formats of it. They're not all the same. They don't all have the same impact. And as they exist in different jurisdictions, have varying degrees of success. And this is the version of rent control which comes recommended by none other than the London School of Economics in a fantastic report that they produced a few years back. So rent stabilisation is not to say that the government goes in to the private rental market and says to landlords, this is the amount of rent you can charge and you can't charge a penny above that. It is to say that there ought to be a mechanism within tenancies that governs rent increases, which is fair and reasonable, that protects people who are in long-term tenancies from facing exploitation because they're essentially stuck in a home because it's their home and they've built their life there, and introduces some sort of metric to calculate what rent increases can be. I was contacted very recently by a landlord who I know very well, who asked for my opinion on changes to a tenancy contract he was looking at introducing to his tenants. He said he wanted to introduce an annual rent increase which was based on the average of RPI over the previous 3 years. And I thought, what a great idea that is, because it does enable him to get increased income from his properties to maintain it, but it shelters the tenant from particularly harsh conditions if RPI is high 1 year, because it'll be balanced by RPI in the lower years. It's that kind of mechanism that you look at to say rent increases can't exceed a particular amount. That's very different to rent caps, where there is evidence of the harm that they can sometimes inadvertently cause. Again, sir, this shouldn't be controversial, because when I've pushed this housing minister, and in fact the previous housing minister, on the changes they're looking to make to the residential tenancy law, when you look at the fine print of their answers, they actually say that they accept this. And I would say to this housing minister, I'd be shouting that from the rooftops if I were you, because that's a really good policy. It's one that would provide for great comfort to people out there that something is on the horizon that's going to provide them with security in their tenancies and not see them face extortionate rent increases which can't be appealed. So it appears that that's already in the pipeline. That ought to be something we jump and shout about, because it's a really good idea. And if by accepting it in this amendment, we are as an assembly saying, great, we're happy with that direction of travel, keep going, and we await the greater detail on that. It also refers to open-ended tenancies, again, something that is commonplace in many jurisdictions in Europe, where there's a much greater renting culture, where large swathes of people simply have no interest in owning their homes because the protection they have in their rental contracts provides them with more or less the same security as if they owned their homes. They can live there as long as they like, and if they are to be asked to leave that property, there are certain prescribed circumstances in which that can be done, and there are prescribed notice periods as well. So if a landlord, for example, wants to retire and move into their rental property, they'll probably know a few years in advance that that's their plan. In Jersey law currently, under any periodic tenancy, a landlord can give 3 months' notice to the tenant, and that's it. That's it. No right of appeal, no excuse, no nothing. 3 months' notice, you're out. That's it. Open-ended tenancies would provide greater security and protection to those tenants to know that they're not going to be unfairly removed from their homes. So rent stabilisation and open-ended tenancies. And here's the part that really pains me to say this, but not only is this not an original idea because it's in operation already in many parts of Europe, it is actually being looked at by the UK government right now, who recently produced a white paper on rental housing, and they're proposing measures like this. And it pains me to admit it, because it's the Housing Secretary, Michael Gove, behind it, and I have to stand up and say I think he's done a really good job. And it's one of the very few circumstances in which I may do that. One of my colleagues is whispering about disciplinary on me for having admitted that. Fair enough, I'll have to contend with that. But Jersey risks being out of kilter here, because they are looking at drastic improvements to security of tenure and protection against rent increases in the UK. And whilst there are some bodies that are nervous about that, there are some landlords' representative groups in the UK that are kind of saying, well, this is fair enough, really. And for the best landlords, they won't even notice these changes because they're probably doing them already. It just makes it compulsory rather than voluntary and provides greater protection for those tenants who don't currently have that. So the next bullet point is to say that we move to a means-tested system for calculating social housing rents. The question of how we calculate social housing rents is one that's been asked many times since 2014, I think, when a version of the current system was introduced at the establishment of Andiam Homes as a body, where to make the numbers add up, a decision was made that social housing rents would be calculated at up to 90% of the market rate. Many of us were deeply uncomfortable with that at the time because of the worries we would have about how that might set a benchmark for private sector rents, often a comparison that frankly is inappropriate, depending on what types of tenancies they are and what types of support the tenants get. But also that it would be unaffordable to many people who are on low incomes and put greater pressure on the benefit system. After years of fighting, and I still have the scars on my back to prove this, we finally got it reduced from 90 to 80%, which I hope provides a bit of a break from that to enable the logical next step, which is that we move to a means-tested system where rents are charged based on affordability, not based on what return the Treasury wants from Andiam Homes to pay for other public services. In fact, sir, I couldn't have put it better myself than this. Whilst the cost of investment has to be covered, I question the rationale that pegs public sector rents to the private rental market. As rents have become more unaffordable, the demands made on social security to plug the gap becomes even greater. Taxpayers' money is, I believe, inadvertently being used to support higher than necessary rental levels in the public sector. We urgently need to review this. I completely agree with those words, and those were the words of the current Housing Minister. So I would hope his support for this line would therefore be, therefore we can anticipate. And so the very last line in this amendment for tangible policies to be inputted into this page is to say that we will implement the recommendations of the homelessness strategy. I hope that will be uncontroversial. That's work that began in my tenure to put that report together. We know that there is a great difficulty for those in Jersey facing homelessness. It's often a lot more complicated than just the availability of a home. It's often more actually to do with the support that's provided around that through employment, through mental health, through other things as well. The Minister has spoken in support of that. To a degree, he's put his money where his mouth is as well for himself on Friday, along with myself, the Constable of Trinity, and Deputy Howell, taking part in Sanctuary Trust's Sleep Out event to support them doing the fantastic work that they do to support homeless men in Jersey. And hopefully with the accomplishment of delivering on the recommendations of the homelessness strategy, we can make their work much easier by reducing the demands that there is for those services. So those are a comprehensive package of tangible policies which could, if implemented, have a significant impact in making home ownership more accessible for islanders, making the experience of being a renter in Jersey much more akin to what it is in those jurisdictions that have a greater renting culture, which provides certainty to both landlords and tenants, and to provide a greater supply of affordable housing and do so in such a way that hopefully enables us to protect our precious environment as well, without needing to look at further green fields to be rezoned when there's a better rationalisation of the homes that already exist or are already in the pipeline that could be used to meet the need, which we already have the data to know is there. So on top of that, to enable us to hold the government to account in whatever it does on measures to address Jersey's housing crisis, I'm also proposing adding some extra KPIs into the last page of the CSP so that we can measure the trends and see how successful the government is being. And these are, I think, some pretty basic things like decreasing the proportion of renters who are classed as living in rental stress. You know, there's an unacceptable amount of people in Jersey who are spending more than a third of their income, or in many cases even more than half of their income, just to put a roof above their head. And that's money that they're not able to use to further support their families or spend in the local economy. We ought to want to see that decreased, and that would be a key indicator of whether rental housing is becoming more affordable or not. We want to reduce the number of homes which are left vacant without adequate excuse. I think we pretty much all agree with that, I would hope, but we want to see it actually happen and be confident that that is what we're delivering. Increase the proportion of young adults who own their own home. There are many young people who frankly are losing hope in Jersey, losing hope that they have a future here because they don't have the opportunities that may have existed in previous decades where there were many fewer people on the island to contend with buying the homes that exist. People who feel that they, even on a decent professional salary, aren't able to acquire a one-bedroom property because of the sheer demand there is for them there. And that risks having all sorts of repercussions for the rest of our society and economy if we're losing these bright young people because they're choosing to move from Jersey because they have lost hope that they'll ever own their own home. And I think with some action like what's being proposed in here, we could turn the curve on there and make Jersey a place where people feel that that option for them will be available. And of course, we want to decrease the average waiting times for those listed on the Affordable Gateway for rehousing. We have a gateway system which by its rules, isn't too bad. There's some tweaks that are being made to it in terms of eligibility criteria that are positive and going in the right direction. But the thing that makes the gateway most difficult is simply the fact that there aren't enough homes out there, and there are people who are languishing for very long periods of time on those waiting lists because the home that's right for them and right for their needs doesn't become available quickly enough, and they don't get certainty on that. That's not necessarily a problem with the rules, because if the home doesn't exist, then it doesn't exist. But we want to make sure that when we're delivering new affordable homes, that we are building those for the types of homes that people genuinely need. And I'm sorry to say that we have squandered some opportunities on that. So I've made, I hope, the case for each of the measures that are proposed in this action plan that we seek to insert into the CSP. I will urge the states to adopt the amendment unamended, but we'll come to that momentarily, because I think it gives a much clearer steer to the government of the kinds of things we want to see them deliver on. It cuts out a lot of time and energy that will otherwise go towards running around in circles again, reviewing the same things that actually people have already reviewed. They just didn't necessarily come to conclusions that were politically convenient for some at the time, but we can choose to do things differently to that. And when each of those measures eventually comes to the States Assembly, either in the form of a request for funding in future government plans or the legislation to enact some of these changes, we at that point have plenty of opportunities to hold the government to account then, make sure that the detail is good, that the funding is adequate, and that it will do what it's meant to do, rather than do what this Assembly so many times before has done, which is spend years trying to overcome that first hurdle of agreeing what the actual action is, and then risking doing what we saw in the previous term, where there was one occasion where we did agree a very positive action in introducing a landlord licensing scheme, and then a few months later, you turned on it, and people have languished in unsuitable housing in that time because of that inaction from the previous Assembly. So there is no time to lose, and in adopting this amendment as it stands, it would provide a springboard for the government to go on and deliver those things, and hopefully help resolve the housing crisis and spend less time on reviews, deliberations and consultations. And that's why I've brought the amendment.
Is the amendment seconded? Yes, sir. Very well. There is an amendment to the amendment lodged by the Council of Ministers, and I ask the greffier to read that amendment.
Page 2, part 1. For subparagraphs 2 to 5, substitute the following subparagraph. 2. After the final paragraph, there should be inserted the following sentence. We will do this through coordinated and sustained action that tackles the cost of living and housing crisis in line with clear commitments made in the Council of Ministers' ministerial plans and responding effectively to the changing economic environment. Page 2, part 2. For the proposed subparagraph 1, substitute the following subparagraph. In the continue to improve section of the table for housing and cost of living, there should be inserted the words increase the number and standard of private rental homes with rent-safe accreditation. Page 2, part 2. In the proposed subparagraph 2, for the second, third and fourth bullet points, substitute the following bullet points. Increase the number of long-term vacant homes brought back into use. Increase the number of first-time buyer homes. And increase the number of people housed through the Affordable Housing Gateway.
Chief Minister.
Sir, Deputy War is the rapporteur for this amendment.
Deputy War.
Thank you, sir. I have to admit, I've rarely heard such a ringing endorsement given to me for my ministerial plan by Deputy Mezek. In fact, I was beginning to wonder why he even brought an amendment at all. I mean, I find that quite extraordinary. And so as a result of that, I'm having to amend his amendment. Bizarre, really, in my humble opinion. Sir, in my maiden speech to the Assembly, I talked about our island facing not just a housing crisis, but an existential housing crisis, something that affects every part of our society. One of the reasons I stood for election was because I could see my own staff struggling with the high cost of housing. I've seen the effects this has on their health, on their ability to pay for childcare, and on their well-being when they have to work extra jobs just to make ends meet. Deputy Mezek's amendment seems to suggest that the government is not prepared to recognise the problems, nor willing to outline how we propose to tackle the crisis. Nothing could be further from the truth. The government is taking action. I set out clearly in my ministerial plan, as Deputy Mezek has already established, published just 1 week after the Common Strategic Policy was presented to the Assembly, exactly how I will be taking action. Deputy Mezek's amendment attempts to overlay Reform's Housing Crisis Action Plan into or onto the Common Strategic Policy, when in fact the CSP is a far more wide-reaching document outlining the government's high-level ambitions. Reform's Housing Action Plan is an election-era document, presumably written in May. I think the Deputy admits to that. A totally different landscape to the one we are facing now. Since Reform penned their action plan, we have seen unprecedented events unfold that have dramatically impacted on our housing and cost of living challenges. We've seen a surge in inflation, which was 6% in May compared to 10.4% now. We've seen a hike in interest rates, increasing from 1% in May to 3% now. And we've seen an energy crisis take hold in light of Russia's war with Ukraine. But despite this, Reform's action plan remains unchanged. Whilst I respect that document, for there is little in it that I'm not doing already, and I wouldn't say we're plagiarising it, I want to make it clear that the government has recognised that events have moved on since May. And they've certainly moved on since 2021, when the Housing Policy Development Board's recommendations were published. I refer to this report because it appears that that is the foundation of the Reform Action Plan. Would you believe that there have been 100 reports on housing in the last decade? All, I'm sure, have been well-intentioned. However, they represent a snapshot in time when the landscape was completely different. In much the same way Reform's Action Plan is a document of its time, so too is the Housing Policy Development Board recommendations. The recommendations it made were helpful and led to some positive things happening. At my last count, 10 out of 12 of the recommendations were implemented or being progressed. But now is the time to look forwards, not backwards. And to reassure you that I am taking action, I want to take this opportunity to explicitly outline why Deputy Mezek's amendment is unnecessary, because I am already doing so much of what is proposed. Deputy Mezek's amendment asks to increase the proportion of homes designated as affordable, but the Deputy previously agreed to an amended version of this policy, which comes into force in January. Deputy Mezek's amendment also asks for a right of refusal for tenants to purchase their homes. Changes to the residential law will already seek to address security of tenure, and that is coming through next year. The Deputy asks for a shared equity scheme to support first-time buyers. I have £10 million to increase home ownership. This will need to be spent in a careful and considered way to maximise its long-term benefit to our community. The Deputy already knows how challenging it is to spend that money appropriately. Deputy Mezek's amendment asks that all homes built on publicly owned land to be for first-time buyers, social rental houses or downsizers. This policy already exists in the Bridging Island Plan. The Deputy calls for an empty property tax. A more sophisticated analysis of the various options to bring vacant homes back into use will be published shortly, in fact in the next 2 weeks. Deputy Mezek seeks a landlord licensing scheme. The Minister for the Environment has already announced he's going to put forward proposals for introducing a licensing scheme for the regulation of private rented dwellings, which I note Deputy Mezek supports. Deputy Mezek also proposes a new residential tenancy law to provide European-style rent stabilisation and open-ended tenancies. My new residential tenancy law already looks to introduce rent stabilisation and open-ended tenancies. The Deputy proposes a means-tested system for social housing rents, but the majority of social housing tenants already have their rent paid for by income support, a means-tested system. I will also this week be seeking the Assembly's approval for a new rent control tribunal, something else the Deputy is looking to install. And finally, Deputy Mezek calls for implementation of the recommendations of the homelessness strategy. We already have a published definition framework, which has improved the visibility of homelessness. My ministerial plan is clear that I am committed to this issue. Not only am I already doing the work the Deputy is calling for, but I'm doing it in recognition that events have moved on since the time of the election. As Minister for Housing Communities, I am the one dealing with Jersey's housing crisis. I am the one held accountable for decisions, and I intend to stand by the measurable, ambitious actions I've pledged to take and which are clearly outlined in my published ministerial plan. The second part of our amendment deals with changes to Deputy Mezek's proposed performance measures. We agree that accountability is important, but they must also be measurable. The changes we have proposed will not only enable this, but also increase accountability. For those paying close attention, you will see that Deputy Mezek's amendment proposes the substitution of an indicator for the percentage of islanders who are very satisfied with their housing. Our amendment will keep it in. If we are not improving islanders' satisfaction with their housing, it would beg the question, why, I will not use my expletive I used earlier, are we even here? I would urge the Assembly to accept our proposed amendments. Thank you.
Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, Bab. I've never heard someone so furiously agree with me on almost everything. There is so much in what he said he wants to do that is in my amendment, unamended. That amendment may term it in more certain ways than is termed in his ministerial plan. The point of having it as an amendment to this CSP is that it gives this Assembly the clear opportunity to go ahead and endorse those specific measures, because we've learnt the lessons of history, which is that you can start out with good intentions all you like, but you would be amazed how many good ideas come to this Assembly to die. How many times the state U-turns on something or says, yes, we like that idea, that's very nice, but we'd like a consultation first before we're prepared to do anything, and then adds at least 2 years onto the delivery of that. We've seen that over some really basic stuff that has been atrocious to behold. So he can call the Reform Jersey Housing Crisis Action Plan of its time in May. These ministerial plans published in October, well, you know, perhaps in March we may label the same criticism at them. That would be reasonable, wouldn't it? The fact of the matter is, at some point you have to make a decision and say, this is on principle what we want to do, now go ahead and do the work to achieve it. The fact, sir, is that the amendment that's proposed by me to the CSP does provide greater detail and clarity as to what specifically will be delivered. It uses much more definite language in that. It confirms things like rent stabilisation and open-ended tenancies. Let's contrast that to what's in the ministerial plan, which says developing proposals to protect tenants from excessive rent increases as soon as possible. Well, I agree with that, but it's not as definite as what I'm saying. And what I'm saying sounds like it's not at odds with what the Housing Minister wants. It sounds like, thanks to the work that led up to instructions for a new residential tenancy law being drafted, that it sounds like those are going to be included in that residential tenancy law. And I very much look forward to seeing the detail and ready, if necessary, to propose amendments to beef it up. Again, another analogy I don't like as a vegetarian, but this minister sounds like he's heading in the right direction on that. So what's the harm in accepting an amendment that provides the clarity at this point now that the Assembly is prepared to say, yes, go ahead and do that, which makes it much more likely that when he comes to this Assembly, having already had permission in that instance, then the debate we have next time round is less one on principle and more one on the detail and the veracity of what he's proposing, whether it is actually going to be fit for purpose. That's a much better debate then. It's less fractious, because we're not arguing about what we want to achieve, we're simply arguing about how we strengthen what's being proposed. And that's a much better debate to be having on these kinds of measures. So he said that 10 out of 12 of the Housing Policy Development Board recommendations have either been delivered or progressed. Now, there's a big difference between delivered or progressed. They're not the same thing. They don't evaluate at the same point in the timetable there. There are things that were proposed in that report which currently are not in force. We don't currently have rent stabilisation. The many tenants out there who face inflationary rent increases can tell us that. We don't have open-ended tenancies already. And again, many people can testify to that because of the disruption that they face in their lives when they're faced with their 3 months' notice for no reason, without the security that they would otherwise be provided. The parts of the Housing Policy Development Board's recommendations that have been delivered mostly are the behind-the-scenes recommendations. It made recommendations about reforming the Strategic Housing Partnership, for example. That's a good thing to do, but it doesn't make a difference immediately on the ground for people in their homes. Those are the recommendations that have been delivered from the Housing Policy Development Board. The rest of them are much further behind and have not yet been delivered, and more will need to be done before they are delivered. So let's just read through a few other of the proposals in the ministerial plan. So we'll go straight to number 2. Working collaboratively with the Strategic Housing Partnership and states members to find solutions and new opportunities together. Great, but that's not clear what it actually leads to. It doesn't say to people out there what new policy or what new support they will get. It just says that the right people are talking to each other. That might provide some reassurance, but it's not quite the detail that's proposed in my amendment. It talks about, again, taking action to bring vacant homes back to the market. Okay, we're still waiting on the detail for that, but in this plan, that isn't detail. It's noble and fine, we support that, but it's not the detail. It says, working with the Minister for the Environment in delivering appropriate mechanisms to protect and support private rental tenants. Okay, great, but it's not very detailed. The detail is what, thankfully, since this has been published, has come out, which was the statement from the Minister for the Environment, which is a good one and a step in the right direction. And we all agree with that by the sounds of it. I agree with it. The Housing Minister, I hope, agrees with it. The Minister for the Environment agrees with it. What are we arguing about? Indeed, what are we arguing about? We agree to that. So let's add that line in. Great, we've had that approval at this point, and then the next thing we can argue about will be the detail of the regulations, and that will hopefully be a constructive debate when it gets to this. There's one point he did say that, I hope I misheard this. I heard him say something along the lines that the issue that I've raised about publicly owned land being used to deliver affordable housing was already dealt with in the Bridging Island plan. I'm sorry to say to him that it certainly was not. I sat through that 2-week-long debate. I brought multiple amendments to it. I attempted to bring an amendment to it which said that when it was publicly owned land or land owned by publicly owned bodies like the SOJVC or Andium, that all of the homes that were delivered on it would be for some form of affordable allocation. And I was subjected to what I regarded as a wrecking amendment, which said that actually the minimum percentage would be 15%. I was asking for 100%. So it certainly is not the case that the planning rules account for that. The government can itself unilaterally decide to issue instructions to its bodies to say we're actually requiring you to go above and beyond what the planning guidance or the planning rules say. If they've done that, I'll be very pleased with that, but I don't think they have. So the rule currently is that it's 15% minimum, not 100%. I think we should change that. I think we should bring something as a matter of priority to say we will raise that so we're not using publicly owned land to build homes that don't match the profile of need that there is out there. So other parts of the ministerial plan refer to collecting more data. Again, nobody disagrees with that, but by all means collect as much data as you like. But if you're sat in a mouldy home facing either an eviction notice or a massive increase in your rent, you won't find much consolation in the idea that the government is collecting more data. It's not going to change your here and now for you. We need to get to a situation where we are able to affect people's here and now much quicker. And that means by saying today, not we're going to develop proposals one day in the future to protect tenants from excessive rent increases. We're going to decide today that the direction of travel is European-style rent stabilisation, and we are working to bring that forward, and that will be in place as soon as possible. Hold tight until then, and when that's in place, you'll get the protection that you need. It's to say to those private developers out there, great when you're looking to develop homes, but we're in a housing crisis, and you have a duty to your island to contribute as much as you can to providing opportunities for young people to own their homes. And so progressively, we'll start raising that minimum contribution that you're required to make, rather than say, oh, perhaps we'll think about it at some point in the future. In his speech just now, the Minister didn't say too much about the proposal to introduce the first right of refusal for private sector tenants to purchase their homes when the landlords decide to sell. He moved on fairly quickly from it. But in the report to his proposition, I'm very disappointed with what it says, because I think it really does misunderstand this. It says, if a tenant is in a position to buy a property they are currently renting, they will already have the ability to offer market value when the property is put on the market. Well, not if they've been evicted, they don't. That's the problem. The problem is that when the landlord wants to sell, they issue their 3 months notice, out you go, and then they put it on the market. So the person's already lost their home by that point. They're out, they incur the expense from that, having to find a new deposit, having to find somewhere new to live, and all the costs for moving, setting up new utility bills and all the rest of it. So I think this comment is misguided there. It misses the point there, and I think it's a constructive proposal to say we have what exists in other places, France being one example, that says if you want to sell a home that's got a tenant in, first you've got to check with the tenant whether they want to buy it or not. And if they say no, no problem, carry on. If they say yes, great, you found a buyer, instantly. No downsides to that. That would be something very easy that would provide that opportunity to long-term tenants to own their homes, and it's dismissed, I think, wrongly in this. So, sir, before I lose my voice, the final point to make on this, sir, to I think, sum up the position, is that we have a choice with this amendment to the amendment to adopt another perfectly nice paragraph that says nothing anybody disagrees with, that is well-intentioned and, great, I don't disagree with it. Or we have the opportunity to say no to that, but yes to a much more substantive one that provides a blueprint for many of the measures that could be introduced that will have a tangible impact in helping to alleviate the housing crisis. That includes many ideas which are already underway, but which don't yet have official political support from this body, and which, without that, may come here to die later on. And it proposes some new ones as well to throw into the mix as positive contributions, ideas that otherwise aren't being pursued to help people either to own their own home or to have more security in their rental contract. It provides greater clarity, more detail for tangible action, and reduces the need for further review, consultation, or deliberation. It enables us to get on with delivery rather than more and more talking. That's why I think my original amendment is superior, and I say to the Minister that in the absence of State's approval for some of these points now, he can expect that we'll be coming back very quickly with them anyway. So we can get it over and done with today, or we can come back at some point in the near future to debate all of these all over again, because we're not going to stop pushing anytime soon. So on that basis, I hope the States Assembly will say thank you very much to the Housing Minister, but on this occasion, we'll go for something more comprehensive and detailed so that we can empower him to come back with more positive proposals as a matter of urgency.
Deputy, does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? If no, Deputy Reniff.
I'll just make a point relevant to particular areas of mine. ministerial responsibility, and in particular the point about relation to requiring all homes built on publicly owned and to be for first-time buyers. And just to say that this is an attempt, I think, to re-legislate the debate that was had over the Bridging Island Plan, and to explain why I think the decision that was reached in the Bridging Island Plan was the right one on balance. When we come to redevelop these sites, or when they come to be redeveloped, they present a variety of different situations, circumstances, and quite often money needs to be spent to help to deliver other benefits in relation to those sites. For example, it might be to preserve listed buildings. It might need investment to preserve to restore or preserve listed buildings. It might be to remediate contaminated land. There might be many reasons why we need to raise money for those sites. And so the ability to be flexible in responding to those sites and say, we are all agreed we want the maximum amount of affordable housing that's possible, but we do have to have some regard to the realities of those sites. And I think that's an important point to bear in mind. So I think that's a point I could make in relation to also to the affordable housing amendment, which also has an island plan context to it, and I would make a very similar point in terms of the need for flexibility. And I think, therefore, that all the way through where I look at these amendments from reform, from the Deputy, I see a desire to impose hard and fast rules, and I can understand that. I can understand that there's frustration, but I also have to say that I think that actually there's flexibility and responsiveness to actual circumstances on the ground, to particular conditions. Preserving that flexibility feels to me to be very important, and that's the reason why I feel that overall the amendment from the Council of Ministers preserves that ability to act in a way that is reflective of the real situations that we're likely to encounter, and to do the maximum good that's possible in the real world. So all the way along, you know, I could pick up little points like that. I'll pick up one more, which is to say, for example, about the licensing of private rented dwellings. It is private rented dwellings, not landlords. We're not licensing landlords. You know, we can't just accept these things that come along just because they're there and they broadly in line and so on. We're quite specific about what it is we're trying to achieve, and I think our amendment reflects better the realities that we're trying to deal with. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. I just feel I should speak because, again, what we've got here is when I heard Deputy Mezek open his proposition, his amendment, it was extremely positive and conciliatory, and saying, look, these are the things to do. And what we got back was, I've counted it, reform has been mentioned. I didn't count the last one, actually. At least 12 times in debates, the word reform. And it does seem to be that there's an obsession, sir, with that. When we talk about an assembly whereby we're looking at propositions and amendments and the value or not of them. Now, of course, there's going to be a mention of that. I understand that because it's what we all stood on for election. A policy of what we're going to do with housing. A practical set of measures to address the housing crisis that we have. And there is a choice between watering it down and having vaguer statements, which some see as more adaptive. I would say are effectively less effective, because that middle ground that is searched for, which isn't a middle, it's slightly to the right, that conservative ground of not pushing too much, not doing too much at any one time, is not improving the lives of people day to day, in the poor housing, in the expensive housing, in the homes that they can't afford. And unless we take some action now, we have got serious issues for our young people. I'm currently trying to help my daughter find somewhere to live because she wants to move out. Quite right. she's 23. I'm going to get her age wrong now, I'm getting in trouble. She's 23, sir, and I left home at 17. I couldn't imagine going back home at 23. I love her dearly, but she needs to set up herself. We've been to look at some places, because I insist in going, because I'm like that. And the price of these places is unbelievable for the size of them. And we're not taking direct action. You're talking, and we're talking, and we're talking, and we're planning. And we've got £10 million to invest, but we don't know what to do with it yet because we have to spend it wisely. We need to take some action. And what Deputy Mezek has suggested are practical, tangible actions about rent levels, about first-time buyers, about the rights of tenants in their homes. And my biggest concern for anyone who's looking for a home, a young person, is they have to go and deal with those contracts, which are so set against them. There's huge deposits to pay, and they're going to lose those deposits too frequently, because if you read the small print of these contracts, you really are in trouble. Even with Andium Homes, you know, you've got to return it to the way it was when you first got it, which was virtually empty. And if you've done any work and invested money, you've got to undo that work, which is a complete waste of money, and it costs you money to undo the work that you did in the first place. And so what we have is a completely untangible set of conditions for people to live in day to day. And what has been suggested here and agreed with, and the Minister seems to be saying, well, we're going to do them, we're doing them, but we'd like to replace those tangibles with some generalities because we think that's better. And as for the notion of licensing a home and not the landlord, who fills in the form? The front door? I mean, who fills in the form? It's the landlord. Who is responsible? Who takes the cash? Who takes the rent each month? We looked at a set of flats. There were 27 in the block, it's just around the corner, just up the road. And I worked out that the income from that set of flats would be £500,000 a year for 27, one of which was a one-bedroom flat. And as I said, you better measure the bed that you're going to take because I don't think it's going to fit into the bedroom that they're calling a bedroom. We have an uncontrolled housing market. The free market has failed us. The free market is failing us. We have to take some tangible actions now. And the beginning point of those actions is the Common Strategic Policy. And we offer up these ideas which are tangible. And I do believe many in this Assembly would agree with. Many in this Assembly will want to do. This is your opportunity to say, yeah, actually, let's do those. Let's have a go. Let's actually take those on board rather than the generalities. And I hope the response can be a little more positive than rather just ignoring or negating or saying things are out of date. And I still would like to see the tangible connection between the buy-to-lets and the amount of money that people are asked to pay and some of the issues that you've said have changed since May. We know the cost of living crisis has increased. Never has there been a more important time to have rent stabilisation. Never has there been more important time to offer help to those who might be first-time buyers, which is nigh on impossible on this island anyway, to be quite frank. Never has it been a better time to go through some of the things that we're talking about here. Means tested for calculated social housing. Means testing people's income for income support is not means testing the level of rent for social housing. That is a completely different thing. That's means testing as to what income support you can receive from the government or from the states. Those who are not on income support, that's about means testing what is affordable for people day in, day out, at all stages of their income levels. And that's not, I'm afraid the Minister Sir there is wrong. And I think that's an incorrect assumption that we shouldn't be taking and a confusion in this situation. I mean, I would like to see, I bought the landlord's licensing and it was agreed in principle. The worst day in my assembly last time, I think, was when we came back and it was then rejected because it was a contradiction. And I'm pleased to see that many of those who voted against it at that time, who were sat in this assembly, are now saying they'll vote for it and realise the error of their ways. But that's not all that we need to do. So I urge members to, let's just forget the reform thing, because you're not going to vote for us anyway. We don't need your vote. You know, you might vote for us in our constituencies. I don't know. I'm assuming something I shouldn't assume. You know, but there we go. We're not talking about that to you. We're talking about what's right. And I think what Deputy Mezek was trying to say is we really thought this through. It's been thought through, and these are the things that come from the Housing Policy Board, which, by the way, was the vast majority of the old government, which couldn't be more diametrically politically opposed to us, which was a real compromise situation for us to be in, as many will know. And these are not ill thought through policies. They're not just thrown together. And there's some tangible stuff to actually do there. Please let's not replace it with more views, more searching for data, more coming up with ideas, because we'll be a year ahead. Nothing else would have happened. The situation would get worse, and people will still be struggling to find somewhere to live. And, you know, I'd quite like my children to stay on Ireland so I can see them more often. They might drive us mad, but we all want to see them. So, you know, can we get on with this, please? Because I want them to stay. Thank you very much.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak? I close the debate and call upon Deputy Ward to respond.
Thank you, sir. It's an eye-opener to hear all the commentary being made here. I think the first thing we need to do, Deputy Mezek talks about there's no meat on the bone. That was the term he used. Remember, the CSP, it's a strategic document. If we start looking at imposing the reform proposals in their amendment onto the CSP, they were basically being dictated to. As I've already pointed out, times change, times move on. If we haven't got the ability to adapt, adjust, and so forth and so on, I don't see how we actually refresh the pool, how we move forward in when the landscape changes so dramatically. I'm a little disappointed that with Deputy Ward saying, "Oh, it's all negative. We're all negative." You know what? I think that I'm amazed how much Deputy Mezek actually agrees with what we're doing at the moment, what this housing minister is doing at the moment. You know, it's not. If it was negative, he would be castigating me, but it isn't. All he's depressed about is that. All the deputy is depressed about is the fact that he can't actually see exactly what we're doing. We haven't, published that detail. As I've already said, we are already doing so much of the work, and without repeating my speech once again, I do not wish to bore everybody here today, but we are already doing so much of the work which is being proposed. All as the deputy is trying to do is, he's just basically trying to dictate to this assembly what it is he wants done. I'm sorry, we're doing lots of stuff, and I'm accountable for the stuff that we are doing. So please, I tried to so I just grab a couple more notes here. One of the things which is observation I would make is, it's easy, as Deputy Mezek knows, having been a previous House Minister, to come up with a raft of measures. Uncosted, whatever, they're just some measures. I have to deal with the actuality. So I need to make sure that those proposals are properly thought through. We need really to make sure that they are done. States members have the democratic right to consider and challenge policy decisions when they come forward. Deputy Mezek's amendment's going to rob them of doing that. So I urge the Assembly to reject his amendment and obviously to accept mine. Thank you.
Is the appel called for?
Yes.
Yeah. Very well, I ask members to return to their seats. The vote is on the amendment of the Council of Ministers to the Sixth Amendment of Deputy Mezek. And I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been adopted. 35 votes pour, 11 votes contre.
Give the 11, please.
11.
Those voting contre, Deputies Southern, Lehegara, Ward, Owls, Mezek, Coles, Horay, Curtis, Feltham and Kovac, and in the chat, the Conotabs of St. Juan and St. Lawrence.
Well, we now return to the amendment as amended. It's already been proposed and seconded, so does any member wish to speak on the amendment as amended? That's the Sixth Amendment as just been amended. If no member wishes to speak, those in favour of adopting the amendment kindly show. Those against? The amendment is, I think, adopted. A quick calculation. Right. Very well, the next amendment is the Fifth Amendment, lodged by Deputy Ward. I'm assuming you don't accept the amendment to your Fifth Amendment, Deputy?
No, sir. I do not, thank you.
Guess that might be the case. Therefore, we'll come to it when we come to it, and I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
After the words report of this proposition, insert the words, except that on page 15 of the report, following the fifth paragraph, after the words utility services, there should be inserted the following new paragraph. We will also actively promote and action the disinvestment from fossil fuel linked investments from Jersey linked businesses, adopt a policy of opposing investment in fracking, and enable Jersey as a pioneer and global leader in sustainable finance and introduce the legislation required for sustainable finance.
Thank you, sir. Caught me unawares. I was expecting Deputy Curtis's amendment next, but I got it wrong. I was looking at, but never mind. I don't know why I got it wrong. But anyway, it's okay, sir, because it's all in the preparation, like decorating.
For the record, Deputy, this is the last amendment, I think, before we resume.
Is it?
Well,
I'll take
except
the
for
time
the
then.
amendment. Except for the amendment. To your
Yeah, I'll take my time then, sir. I hope you're sitting comfortably. So, Jersey States Assembly has declared a climate change emergency. I'll say it again. We have declared a climate change emergency. The parish of St Helier, sir, declared a climate change emergency. One might say ironically. Since then, we've seen a carbon neutral roadmap. Calling it a roadmap, I never thought was a good idea, but there we go. A citizens panel on climate change, and Jersey adding its name to the Paris Climate Change Agreement. In my opinion, giving up our independence to do anything, which is exactly what we're showing with the amendment that was adopted poorly by this Assembly. Throughout this time, there's been a dialogue around how much we matter as both an emitter of greenhouse gases, given our size, and the influence we can have as a small jurisdiction. And often, the argument has been, we're too small to matter. It doesn't matter. It's China, it's America, it's the UK. They're the ones emitting the carbon dioxide. Why are we bothering? What is it about this? Why us taking a few cars off the road isn't going to make a difference? And that's been the argument. That's why we haven't got the money needed for the climate change roadmap, which is agreed, but it's okay because we're going to carry on anyway. And that's what's happened. But there's one area, sir, and where we bat above our weight, and that's in the area of finance and investment on this island. I think it's over 51% of our income, according to government figures, comes from the finance industry. The GVA contribution to this sector can be over 50% in some years. However, obviously, so there's an issue with GVA on small economies, but we won't go into the economic debate because I might lose you at this time of the day. Now, the CSP, the Common Strategic Policy, is a key indicator of the principles of government in Jersey by stating the principle of, and this is why I brought this amendment. By us stating a principle of de-investment or divesting in fossil fuels and fracking, Jersey can send a clear signal of importance of this key environmental change. And sir, this is a separate issue in the world of climate change debate. It has been shown in COP27, which was disappointing in its outcome, that the agreement was made to perhaps compensate, and I say perhaps because I'd like to see the money actually come about, those communities that are being seriously affected by climate change, those developing communities who aren't the greatest emitters. And so there's an agreement to we'll pay for them. But there's no agreement on actually stopping use of fossil fuels and cutting them back, and fracking. And fracking is the worst form of removal of carbon from our planet, from the surface of our planet. It's as if we're not satisfied in removing it from deep below the ground or from coal fields, but we have to take that one step further and draw every last piece of trapped carbon in our crust in order to pump it into our atmosphere. And then a little quick science lesson for everybody. Just can't resist it. We need to remember that that carbon was buried there millions of years ago. That's why it's called a fossil fuel. And when we burn it, we release that trapped carbon into our atmosphere, and we increase the level of carbon dioxide, which traps heat and fundamentally changes our climate. And we are facing an existential threat. That's not a joke threat, that's a real one. An existential threat to our generation, generations to come. There are countries around the world that are seeing it right now, including ourselves. Including ourselves. So, why do I want us to divest? Although we're not going to discuss it now. It's been taken out by the amendment. And it has been taken out by the amendment, because the amendment has got rid of two sentences that were key in my amendment. The amendment that has been accepted, if we accept it, that is, would take away that we will actively promote the action of disinvestment from fossil fuel-linked investments from Jersey-linked businesses, and it would adopt a policy of opposing investment in fracking. And it would leave just a comment on green investment. On, I don't know what it is, I've lost track of what the amendment was. It's something like enable Jersey as a pioneer, or this is what I suggested, and a global leader in sustainable finance, and introduce a legislation required for sustainable finance. Sustainable finance for investment in things such as wind farms and electric vehicles and electric storage, which is important, hydrogen, which is probably the fuel of the future. That is a separate thing from the stopping of fossil fuels. The stopping of use of fossil fuels, of coal, oil and gas, and of fracking is separate from that green finance. They are different issues. One may impinge upon the other, but what we are doing in the world, and what we're seeing at COP27 and governments around the world, is that the two things are happening in hand. Well, yes, we'll have green investment, that's great. It's a chance for people to make money out of it again, to grow, which is a complete contradiction, by the way, in climate change terms, and exploit the planet in a slightly different way. But at the same time, we'll keep fracking, we'll keep digging up coal, we'll keep exploring for new oil, because we like to use those things. The World Cup's going on. I believe that the amount spent on the World Cup this time it's either 20 billion or 200 billion, so when before it was about £1 billion. Oil-rich countries can do that. There's a lot of money swirling around there. So what we've done, and the reason I bring this proposition as it is and urge people to reject the amendment, which we haven't done, so I don't know why we're doing this, is to say that as a jurisdiction, as a government, we will put our money where our mouth is. We will put our principles up front and say that we will promote the disinvestment in fossil fuels. We will not, as a government, say to businesses that come here, look, it's okay, bring your oil money, bring the money from fossil fuels, from coal around the world, from the exploitation of new places, from the resources that we'll find wherever, and we'll encourage you to invest here. We will say to jurisdictions, we don't want to do that anymore in Jersey. We want to be a leader in the world and say that we do not encourage that type of investment. Now, in hand, we can encourage sustainable finance and become fit. And the amendment, if the amendment was just a one part of this, I could have accepted that, would have been no problem whatsoever. I had no communication about it, no emails, nothing, no communication whatsoever. I obviously forgot that I should be going and doffing my cap and saying, please, sir, can you speak to me a little bit? I have emailed before, and it took a long time. I emailed about a constituent. It took a few weeks to get back. I'd sorted the problem by the time I got an email back. Now I know everyone's busy, but so am I. So I speak on this. I don't actually know, sir, and I would ask for some advice before I go now with my speech, because the amendment was adopted, and the amendment has taken out.
So allow me to be entirely clear. The amendment hasn't been adopted.
Okay.
The amendment has been permitted for debate.
Oh, yes, of course.
So basically, it is still open to the Assembly to reject
Brilliant.
the amendment.
Thank you, sir.
And for your amendment itself to stay in full vigour.
Thank you, sir. I see my confusion. Okay. Well, in that case, I thoroughly recommend that the amendment is rejected, because what the amendment is doing is stopping the debate on the first two parts of this. And I want that debate in this Assembly, because I want you to say whether or not you think we should be investing and encouraging investment in fossil fuels and fracking on this island. I want the Minister and I want the Assistant Ministers and other members of this Assembly, many of whom stood on the platform of saying, I support action on the environment and against climate change. Many of us will sit here and say, I know some who will say, why aren't we doing more on biofuels? I know that. I know two constables I talk to all the time about that. I want that debate. And this amendment stops that debate. The amendment stops those two parts and it replaces them. And it does it in late order for the wrong reasons and at the wrong time. And I go back to where I was before when I said don't reduce the lodging period, apart from the moral high ground about standing orders, which, you know, I'm going to nosebleed on up there, sir. We have a choice in terms of the Assembly. If we are declaring a climate change emergency, we need to have the discussion on investment in fossil fuels. We need to have the discussion in this Assembly on fracking and whether we believe that we should be investing on it. And we need to have a separate discussion on green finance and the way that we will encourage it. And my amendment says that we will enable Jersey as a pioneer and global leader in sustainable finance and introduce the legislation required for sustainable finance. It is action. It is action. It's not an amendment that says, I've closed the amendment, the other amendment, which doesn't say that, which says actually nothing, really, and just negates this piece of work. So I introduced this now, and so now my question, I suppose, is we now debate the amendment without going any further on the debate on my amendment, don't we?
Well, I think the position is that you would choose to deliver the speech you would have delivered. Nobody knows if the Assembly is going to accept the Council Minister's amendment. It's entirely possible it will, it's entirely possible it won't. So you must proceed on the basis that this is the opportunity to explain the position that you wish to take on your amendment.
Thank you, sir.
That would be my advice. I am conscious, however, that we're coming to 25 past 5, and that I imagine that can't happen in 5 minutes. At 5:30, I'm required by standing orders to ask the Assembly whether it wishes to continue. It's not normally good policy to break a speech mid-flow, but in these circumstances, I wonder if you would wish to ask the Assembly to adjourn now for the purposes of gearing up and continuing with your speech tomorrow morning.
So I think that would be a really good idea, because it's been quite a difficult day.
Can I move the adjournment, sir?
Very well. Can I be entirely clear that if the adjournment is proposed, and we will normally, even though we're 4 minutes early, I will take it, but that will be on the basis that Deputy Ward will continue with his speech as the first item of business tomorrow, and that he's not deemed to have concluded.
Thank you, sir. Yes.
Very well. Very well. The adjournment is proposed. The Assembly stands adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow morning.